pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty for all. All right. So we have gone through, we've got an agenda here. In order, we'd start with Finance Committee and an update about the town with appearances. Just trying to double check. We do have Fred on right now. Would we, and this is more of a question to the other board members, would we want to start with his input further down regarding overtime? Vacation time, and then kind of allow him to have his chance to move on, and then we'll get back to the other members?
That's fine with me.
All right. So, Fred.
Yes.
My understanding, based on reviewing the law and the things you have sent, one, vacation time is something that the town owes individuals. Based on our personnel policy, I do believe we have a use it or lose it with a certain amount that's allowed to roll over each year. Contracted employees or union employees may have slightly different terms. So I guess I would like to ask the question, what's the difference between an employee not using vacation and losing it versus an employee not using vacation because they were told they can't take vacation, and what the town's options are based on that?
Yeah, so first of all, if an employee had an opportunity to take the vacation time and whatever reason the employee didn't take the vacation time, then it is legal that the employee would actually lose that time. But implicit in that, and there's an Attorney General's opinion on this, is that the employee has to be given an opportunity to use the time. So if the situation arose where the employee reasonably believed that they may use the time later in the year, and then suddenly they're told by the employer, because of operational needs, you can't use your time, then in that particular circumstance, the employee cannot lose the time, and it has to continue to be credited for the employee.
And our options on crediting are either pay it out at the end of the fiscal year or allow them to roll it over?
Well, yeah, so if your policy is that you can roll over, let's say, 2 weeks of vacation, so let's say the person has 4 weeks that they accumulate, your policy says they can roll over 2, so the next year they could have 6 weeks, but they can never have more than 6 weeks. Now, if in fact that's not possible to roll over because you say to the employee you can't roll it over, then technically you would have to pay out the employee by June 30th for the additional time that they couldn't roll over. Now, the alternative to that, if it's too costly, is to then meet with the bargaining unit, or if it's a non-union employee, with the employee and say, this year we will allow you to carry over all of your remaining time into the following year. Or you could say, we'll let you carry an additional week, so instead of 2 weeks, it'd be 3 weeks, and we'll pay you out the rest of the time. But any circumstance that is different from your policy, you would need to negotiate with the union or unions, because you have more than one union, you have two unions, technically three with the firefighters. So the first question is, what is it that you want to do? Because you have two or three options. Most employers, and it may not be feasible for you, most employers are saying, we want you to take as much of your vacation time as possible up to June 30th. But if operationally we can't permit you to do it, we will allow you to carry over the additional time into the following fiscal year, but you have to use it up before June 30th of the next year.
So instead of paying out, they're rolling it over.
They're rolling it over, and pretty much universally, by the way. I mean, as you know, we have a pretty large client base. I don't know anyone that's paying it out. They're letting them roll it over. They'll encourage them to use what they can before June 30th. But if they can't use it, then they're just rolling it over to the next year as a one-time situation, not as a general rule, but a one-time situation.
So, and I'll open it up to the other board members in a sec, but I just wanted to throw out kind of an example, and I'd like to hear your feedback on that. So let's say, 80% of our workforce is not been told that you can't use vacation. And we say, we request that you use as much as possible before June 30th.
Right.
From my perspective, I'm curious as to if they don't request, how much vacation do they, I guess what I'm saying is they've got to actually request to use it before they can say we denied it. And second,
right, that's correct.
If they don't request, we're not providing necessarily a blanket rollover of any unused vacation, correct? That's not what you're implying?
No, what I'm saying is if you have a use it or lose it system and they don't take the time for whatever reason, and you haven't said to them you can't take the time, then in that particular circumstance, they lose the additional vacation time. Because use it or lose it systems are legal. But one of the problems that sometimes occurs, and has occurred with other employers right now, is the department head is saying, you can't use the time because we have to keep you working because we need people to work overtime. We have these COVID-19 emergencies, and we can't permit you to take vacation time now. Now, if you aren't doing that, they're governed by your old rules, which is they need to use it by June 30th or lose it. Now, you have to make sure your department heads are not saying to employees that they can't use their vacation time. Because you're going to be bound by whatever your department heads are saying to employees.
Okay. One last thing, Heather. Do you know of any departments that have made statements where their employees cannot use vacation?
Yes, I want to say at least 2, if not 3. Our fire chief, Rob's actually on the line, so he can comment on that. But my understanding is that the police chief has expressly stated to his employees that right now vacation time is not on the table. They have very limited shifts and extended hours so that everyone can rotate through and keep minimal interactions with other people. Rob can attest to whether the fire department has that same piece. And then I'm not positive about DPW. And I would also say that Board of Health, if our health agent or health person, Andrea, asked to take vacation time right now, I would deny it because she is the center of this whole piece. So there are a few people.
Yeah, and let me point out the importance of this issue. And the importance of this issue is under the Attorney General's advisory. It says that if you violate that provision of the law, it would be considered an illegal forfeiture of earned wages. What that means under the statute is they could get triple damages in attorney's fees. So if you denied 1 week of vacation who lawfully was entitled to it, your damage could be 3 weeks of vacation and paying an attorney.
Now, I have another question because I think a lot of perception is vacation's taken a week at a time. If somebody said I wanted to take a week, but we said you could take 2 days instead of a whole week, how does that play into the interpretation of not approving or allowing them to use vacation time?
Well, it depends on, what your contract says. If your contract says that vacation is taken in weekly increments, then you can't break it down to single days. But if your contract doesn't say that and permits single day vacation usage, then again, you have to give adequate opportunity for them to use it. Now, if your department heads have already restricted the use of vacation time, that issue of now saying, okay, take all the time you want may be off the table.
Understood. And I believe there might be, as Heather mentioned, the police department and something else may also fit that category.
Yeah, I'm running into this primarily with police, fire, DPW. It's happened in literally dozens of communities, and probably statewide, it's probably happened in 100.
Okay. Greg, do you have anything you want to jump in on this now?
Yeah, I would have just asked a simple question: may we restrict the vacation and pay them for the time? And if that's not legal without getting subject to the triple damages, can we just let them roll their vacation over? And if we're restricting it for a 2-month period, offer them to give them 2 extra months to use that time up next fiscal year.
Yeah, so first of all, if you don't permit them to use up the time before June 30th, you could pay them. Okay?
If we pay them straight time for that, that should suffice.
Yeah. I mean, they earn vacation at straight time. You can pay it out at straight time. So if you didn't let them use 2 weeks of vacation, they get to June 30th, you could pay them for 2 weeks of vacation. Now, that could be very costly. Now, the other thing...
That could also be diverted to a COVID expense for the bank we're running for issues and expenses the town's incurring for COVID.
Right. So I'm just giving you options. So an option is, yes, you could pay out for any time they weren't permitted to use on June 30th. And you could also, and you should have discussions with the bargaining unit about it if that's your approach. But you could say, we'll let you roll it into next year, but you have to use it by X date. 2 months isn't probably realistic because COVID-19 is still going to be with us 2 months from now. So the situation may not be different.
Specifically, I would say whatever length they were blocked from is the length we'd extend by. So if they're ultimately blocked by 4 months, we'd extend by 4 months or pay for it. But I would, under no circumstances, try to cut anybody's vacation on them. Try to trick them into
So you could, you could do that. So you could legally, and again, you have to impact bargain this with the bargaining units, say that you have X period of time next year to use it up. And it could be 4 months, let's say. So you can do that, and you can also pay out on June 30th. So on June 30th, if they have 2 weeks extra, you could just pay them out for the 2 weeks. But the bottom line is that vacation time is vested, and you either have to pay it out or give it to them.
And we'd only have to pay out the use it or lose it time, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That's what
anything you were going to take away. That's all you have to pay.
Right. And I want to be very clear, gentlemen, in no circumstance do I want to try to take anyone's vacation time. If somebody has just not asked for it, I don't want to look for a technicality. Say, well, you didn't ask for it, so you lost it. Because we've been pretty clear that we didn't want to let police take vacation. And I don't know what the other departments are doing, but I don't want us to be, trying to take.
Yeah, I have some city systems I represent that they've actually had them on emergency schedules, and they aren't even running their regular shifts anymore. They're running like 12, 14-hour shifts.
The police are doing that.
Yeah, in certain cities.
And I know the fire chief, we'll confirm later, I'm very sure he's brought in extra shifts to make sure we have staffing at the station.
Yeah.
So, but we can track those expense also and put it into the state of Fed, whichever it is for the reimbursement, because of the
Right.
COVID expense. So it makes sense to expense it to me.
Yeah, I think it does, and that's what virtually every place is doing. I haven't had any place yet thus far that said they're going to pay it out because it's too expensive and they don't have the funds.
There's a part of me, though, that says if you don't pay it out, you're going to end up paying time and a half for the replacement person next year. So it's actually cheaper to pay it out this year than it is to
Man, we should have
forward
free
over
cash.
and ask the chief to figure out how to fill in that time with overtime.
We should also have the free cash this year. This shouldn't be a huge amount of money. This should be, $10,000 or something. It's not going to be outrageous, I don't think. I haven't done the math. That's a poke of the
That
donkey.
is a good point, and you have to, mathematically go through it because, with regard to police and fire, every shift that's vacant, you try to find a replacement, and you're paying the replacement at time and a half. So, if they could be cheaper to pay out on June 30th rather than roll it over. Now, most places aren't doing that, but it could, potentially be cheaper. Now, you may have a workforce that's unhappy because they may have wanted that vacation time.
Well, I think of it as long as it's up to the rollover amount, they still keep the vacation time because they have the right to save that anyways. I'm just saying before we make it lose time, we should pay for it.
Yeah, so in any of these, I think the first step in this process is the board has to decide what they want to do. Once you decide what you want to do, we are going to have to contact the bargaining units to tell them what we intend to do.
Certainly.
Because they're entitled to impact bargaining. I can do that on your behalf. All you have to do is tell me what you want to do. And then Heather and I can go to the bargaining units, or the alternative is, and sometimes this works best, is the department head in consultation with me goes to the bargaining units, because the local units are usually easier to deal with than the international unions. So the typical situation would be, for example, the police chief would meet with the president of the union and say, I can't let you use the vacation time. This is what the board is looking at. They're looking at, for the rollover that ordinarily would be lost, we'll pay it out. So that dialogue, that impact bargaining usually occurs in this particular circumstance between the department head and the president of the union. But we can coordinate that once the board determines exactly what it wants to do.
I'm prepared to go ahead and make that determination if you guys are. That's the way I'd like to go with it.
Where are you, Dylan? What's your thoughts on this?
I'd like to see it teased out a little bit, a little more, to see if it's the best way forward in an equitable manner for all the employees. If it's an optional opt-in system, is there as much of a concern, Fred, or?
Well, just to follow up on that, I mean, one of your positions could be that you go to the employees and give them a choice. We'll let you carry it over, or in the alternative, we'll pay you on June 30th. Some employees are going to say, yeah, I want to be paid on June 30th because I want the cash.
I think.
So you could do it that way too.
Yeah, I think in regards to our employees, we have two different classifications. We've got those that have been denied vacation and those that haven't. And I
Right.
think we need to have a different approach for both. And I'm probably not going to be everybody's super fan when I say this. But I do think some people have to realize, and Heather, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I don't believe we have not paid anybody we haven't chosen to send anybody home for less work hours or not paid them their normal salary, whether they're working home from not, or whether they've been able to be as productive or not. We've continued to pay every employee of the town their normal weekly wage, correct?
Correct.
So I think people need to know that the town's actually done pretty good by our employees, considering the situation and knowing that we haven't quite had the same productivity. I mean, and I do understand some employees have been much more involved. They, you kind of mentioned Andrea's role, but is it possible there's a couple employees at the library that haven't been able to do as much, but we keep paying them as if they've been there every day? I'm just saying.
I will tell you that some employers, many municipal employers, have been furloughing employees and laying off employees, particularly in the library, council on aging, and other positions, but not DPW, police, and fire.
Right. Because of that, I think if we're going to take the line of, especially for some of those employees we've been paying anyway, and we say, take your vacation now. I mean, if that means you don't do a little training from home, or you can't quite put in what, maybe we lose a little productivity, and we understand that, but take the time and do your best with what you can at home. And I'm just saying, it's one perspective where it's tough, but everybody's losing money on this in some way. I mean, the town's losing money,
Yeah.
employees are losing money. Nobody's
Well,
winning on this. So I just think it's kind of a shared burden when we kind of say, well, if you got vacation, you should be asking for it now and using it, or you will lose it.
Right, and that's what most employers are doing. I mean, they for employees where they can take the vacation time, they're saying, yeah, you have to take the vacation time. You're able to, and you have to take it, or you're going to lose it. Now, however, if you have departments where they're saying, no, you can't use their time, such as police, fire, and DPW, then we're saying they can't use the time, so we have to figure out how they're going to be compensated for that, whether they're going to be paid or whether it's going to roll over.
My statements were strictly for those that we are telling they can't vacation now. I certainly don't intend to let all town employees get paid if they don't use it. Because they got no place to go, it doesn't matter. If they've got the time, sit home and take your vacation time and don't check in the morning. I strictly mean for those employees that we've told that they may not take vacation. Whichever department heads tell us they have told their staff they cannot take vacation. And that would not include library, because there's no reason they shouldn't be. And Heather would probably, she said Andrea wouldn't be allowed to, but most people probably in our town hall could take vacation now as well. I'm talking police, possibly fire, and possibly DPW and Andrea. If they're going to lose it time, I want to pay for that time. Anyone else in town that there's no reason they can't take their time off right now, I don't want to pay them for that. I just don't want to cut people out that we're not allowing them the opportunity.
I agree with that idea, Greg. And that's what I meant. There are two different categories. The ones who are saying no to, and the ones that...
We're only talking about the people we've said you can't lose it. That's the only ones we're talking about that we're making any special provision for. Anyone that we've prohibited from taking vacation, I want to make sure we compensate them any hours they're going to lose and they use it or lose it.
So I think the board's all in agreement on that issue. So, then the only question is, what are we saying to them? Are we saying, that it's going to be paid out June 30th? Are we
Yes.
saying that, pardon me?
Yes. My
I would,
opinion, yes.
I would clarify that a little bit. What I would like is vacation that wasn't used and we denied use of. My first thought is try to pay it out this year, but not to include the standard rollover amount. So if you got 3 weeks, but you're only allowed to roll over 2, we'll pay you 1 week by the end of June 30th. And the other 2 will let you roll as if the normal contract or personnel policy applies and you roll the other 2 weeks like any other traditional possibility. So it's
Only
not
time they're
all
gonna lose.
vacation unless Fred says differently. I wouldn't want to pay out all vacations still sitting on the books, just
No,
Only-
by the way, I do
allowable
agree with you.
Only to lose it.
Only the time they would have lost.
Yes.
right.
That's it.
So if you all agree on that position, then I can work on telling the department heads how they communicate that with employees.
I'll make a motion, gentlemen, that we inform those in town employees that we have prohibited from taking vacation because of this COVID time, that they will be compensated on June 30th for any hours they would lose beyond their rollover hours.
I think that's an accurate motion.
I will second your motion.
Thank you.
Right, again, because it's a Zoom meeting, we'll do it as a roll call vote. I call for a vote.
O'Sullivan, yes?
Clark, yes.
Matt Urban, yes.
And I'd also like to ask Fred to contact the union bargaining representatives and inform them of our decision.
Start that process.
That discussion.
I will begin that tomorrow.
Thank you.
Much appreciated, Fred. Are there any other questions we have for Fred while he's on the line?
No, but I'd like to point out we got this one right. We talked about it last time. I'm glad. We came to the right idea last time. So we're getting better at it.
I'm glad to hear it. You always do well.
Well, not always, but we try.
Okay.
Thank you
So
much.
you have a nice evening, and I'll begin working on this tomorrow.
All right.
Fred.
Enjoy this nice
Okay.
weather. It's finally getting here.
Yes, a little bit.
Golf courses are coming.
Yeah. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Fred.
Thank you.
To the Conservation Commission in December of 2018, and that had to do with the change.
All right, so we'll get back to the kind of the top of the agenda. And actually, with the Zoom meetings, I've been trying to push public comment to the end, so anybody with public comment can add to anything that's already been discussed and go from there. But right now, I would like to focus on the new business and the finance committee. We have 4 items, one regarding FY20 revenues. Let's start there. Heather, I don't know if you want to initiate this or if you want to give the floor to Claire to begin the discussion with FY20 revenues.
Sure, I'm happy to give it a couple seconds and then turn it over to you. So FinCom met on Thursday, and they met the prior week as well, and some of the conversations had to do with the FY20 and then the FY20 budget. We took a look at the FY20 revenues, and we're still looking at the projections. I think when we had met last, we talked about approximately 100,000 to 200,000 that we were going to come in shy as our conservative estimates for FY20's numbers based on our current figures as of 75% through the year. That brought us to the end of March. we were able to use those numbers to kind of extrapolate out, and we also knew which things we were looking at most likely not having any additional funds come in. Then the FinCom also took a look at FY20 expenses. So Claire will have a couple of recommendations for those. And that's probably where I should stop. Claire and Brian are both here on Zoom with us tonight. I think Brian's on the phone, but be able to talk at the end of and Claire's there. But I'm happy to fill in any spots you need me, Claire.
All right, Claire.
Okay, I had got a few things that I looked over today. I don't know if you've looked over your account on what they've spent, but the public safety building has spent 115%. And EMS overtime is 132%. And the data processing has spent 100%. So those shouldn't really spend any more for the rest of the year. The Finance Committee has recommended a freeze on spending. Anything that's already been ordered can be spent, paid for, but they shouldn't be ordering anything that's really non-essential. So we wanted to bring it to the Board of Selectmen to see what your feeling was and if you could take a vote on that. It's what we're recommended to try to keep us on the budget that we can. Now, we did talk to the police chief, and he was very good. He said he would agree with that. He also said that for the FY21, he would level fund his budget. He didn't know where he would level fund it right now, but he said he would definitely level fund it, which I thought was good. He did that of his own,
Yeah.
on his own.
We already froze spending a month ago when this started, unnecessary spending. And I'm curious, though, the fire, the EMS, and the police, are there excesses part of the bank that they're keeping track of for the COVID expense?
That's something I would,
Because I would
although it
suspect
wouldn't, Heather, wouldn't that not show on that report?
we'd
Because
still
it would show in the COVID account, right?
It should show in the COVID account. So I just have a couple comments here for folks to make sure everyone can see. So you should be seeing the all expense report. Is everyone seeing that on my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I'm getting better at this every week. So I just wanted to go over, so there were three different line items, Claire, you had talked about. I just wanted to address them real quick. So
Yeah.
the line items you were talking about, data processing. Data processing is one of those lines where we buy, I believe, our software out of. So it's those one-time annual expenses that we pay up front.
Okay.
That's why we're at 100% there. Shooting down here for a second down to the fire department. I know Rob's on the line, so I don't know if he has the ability to talk tonight, but if I recall correctly, because we have the three different lines, the EMT, the fire, and the ambulance, what ends up happening is if you have someone come in to work that day, and Greg, maybe you can help me on this one too, because I know you have more of an understanding of how the fire department operates. But my
He's on the line.
I'm sorry?
The fire chief is called in.
Oh, Rob, did you want to speak? I don't know if he wants to speak though, man. He might be fighting. Well, if he pops up, anyway, my understanding is that when a person comes to work for the fire department, they might have kind of like a split shift where they have some things that is EMT and some things that is fire, so they pull from both lines. So sometimes one gets out of whack. But essentially, those three lines together operate for the one department, and then the other piece to keep in mind. I know I had spoke with FinCom on this. I don't know if I spoke with everyone on the Board of Selectmen. I think I mentioned it at some point. Rob did have a conversation with me a while ago, back in the summer, as the beginning of fiscal year 20 began. He had talked with Andrew and the FinCom and Board of Selectmen, I believe, to look at transferring additional funds from the ambulance receipts account over to the, I believe it was, I don't know if it was the EMT or the ambulance account, in order to supplement wages. And once he got the informal approval from both of the boards, it was supposed to move forward to the fall town meeting. So he was operating with the understanding that he was going to get those additional funds because they weren't something to raise and appropriate. They were just something to transfer from ambulance receipts. And he's been operating his budget with the assumption that those funds are coming. So that could also explain a little bit of the number being under. And then to Claire's point, COVID-19, we do have separate, I'm seeing where they are in here. We do have separate lines for COVID-19 now to keep all of those expenditures separate so that it is easier both for the accountant and also for all the departments when we go to submit for reimbursements to be able to find the answers to that question.
Now, are the COVID on this one?
I'm taking a look right now. I'm not sure I'm able to.
I didn't seem to find them.
I can always come back to it, Claire. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
I would expect these
You hear
budgets
me?
are being done for the total spent as the budget. And they're keeping a
Anybody hear me?
separate accounting for the COVID. So the budget still runs the total of the budget, and the COVID should just be recorded separately. So how we can take the COVID amount and say, yeah, the budget was 100 and 30 of that was COVID. And you just keep track of the 30 separate, but the whole 100 should be in the budget here, I believe. So in other words, I think these inflated numbers will become down with the COVID reimbursement.
I don't know if she's doing it that way. Jean would have to let us know that. You know, Heather?
So my understanding is what we're doing currently is anything that we know is a COVID-19 related expense, whether it's an employee for overtime to cover for someone being out due to it, whether it's expenses related to it or something else, we do it going into a separate COVID-19 account.
Does anybody hear me?
I can hear you, Bob.
Oh, all right. Sorry about that. I was trying to figure out how to mute my cell phone.
Turn your speaker down, Bob. You're reverbing.
You still there, Bob? I think we lost you again, Bob.
Anybody hear me?
Yes.
And we hear the puppy.
All right. Now I think I got to figure it out.
Yes, you do.
All right. In regards to my overtime account, so the way Heather had given the information about that 22,000. So what ended up happening is we pay a paramedic for the day. In the event that I can't hire a paramedic, I open up the shift to members of the department before I allow any of the full-time members to work overtime. I only use the additional full-time members as a last resort if we can't fill the shift. But what ends up happening with my overtime budget is that if a paramedic doesn't work, that money's budgeted under the EMS salaries account. I end up bringing on one of the EMTs to work in place of the medic so that we can meet the minimum staffing for the ambulance. That overtime rate, especially for an EMT, is actually the same rate as what I pay for the paramedic. So that money's budgeted, it's in the salaries account, but it's coming out of the overtime account. And at the end of the year, the additional money that's saved in the EMS salaries account will offset the overtime. That's the easiest way to explain it.
Okay,
Gets a little confusing. And as far as COVID related, any shifts that I've had to cover due to COVID related, I mean, we did have 3 of our people exposed to a positive patient and they had to get quarantined, so we had to backfill their shift. That's being tracked separately by Jean. She has a separate line that she's paying that out of.
yeah,
So those hours aren't included in this at all?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. If you look at last year's budget, this year I significantly had reduced that number. And then, back in October or September, one of our paramedics broke his leg and he was out for 2 full months. And obviously that was an unforeseen incident. So I had to cover his shifts for 2 months. He had enough sick time, but at the end of the simplest way to explain it, at the end of the year, what's left over in the EMS salaries should offset whatever is expended in the overtime.
Excellent.
that
Now-
sounds good.
It's
So John has the same explanation.
we're into May now, so the finance committee can start considering account transfers to help balance out some of these numbers. So technically, Bob, if you wanted, you could submit that transfer from salaries to overtime and kind of take that percentage out so it doesn't keep confusing people when they see that it's 132% overtime, but you're only at whatever the 80% salaries were.
Right. I thought about that, and I think I wanted to wait till we got through May. With the COVID stuff, I can't predict what could happen. So I think once we get to the end of May, beginning of June, I'll probably do that, and I'll have a better idea. Pending nobody gets injured or anything like that, where they have to use sick time or extended sick time unforeseen.
Okay. What do we have for any other percents that are over 100% at this time?
Was the only thing was the snow removal, which is 35,787, which we have anyways. You always have to take care of that.
Is that beyond the overages we already approved?
That doesn't show up on this, does it? That was overage just for them to spend. This figure comes from the GL. Comes from this report. Would you know that, Heather?
I do not, looking at the report too, because in the snow and ice, that's where those numbers are showing, the 121, 129. But my understanding, without knowing specifically how Barre traditionally does it, if most communities understand when they're even budgeting their snow and ice that they're going to go over that number.
Yeah.
They're just trying to be in compliance with Mass General laws, where the snow and ice budget is the one thing that communities are allowed to deficit spend on.
Yeah,
Want to make sure that they're in compliance, which is usually like $1 or $2 more a year, knowing that they've never actually met the numbers that were there in history.
My understanding is when you read this, Greg, the unencumbered balance for snow and ice for materials and labor that would show negative on this, that's the deficit spending, is the total deficit spending this year, no matter what the board had approved for additional expenses for deficit. So this is based on just what the original budget was in June 30 last year that got approved by town and what we spent this year. It really doesn't relate to the total amount that we authorized to kind of go into deficit the first time it came before us. I don't think that number is actually tracked on this ledger.
Because I think that was significant that it should have not been exceeded. And we haven't had many real incidents to take from after that.
I'm hoping you're right.
You always, the selectmen always approve the spending, but this shows what we budgeted and what it's gone over, so that what you told them they could spend, this shouldn't go over that, this deficit.
I don't recall the dollar amount we said they could spend, that we approved for overspending already. But we tried to make a good guess at it to get it
Yeah,
where we wouldn't, so I would bet it's okay.
I didn't look back at last year's, but I think this is lower.
I would expect
I
something.
thought it used to be like 40 something,
This wasn't a bad year, it really wasn't.
yeah. So that didn't look that bad.
The one thing I would like, though, is in this report, Heather, is to start adding in any of the COVID costs, even if you throw it at the very bottom in a whole new section of, you know, its original budget was 0, but we've expensed this due to COVID. So that if it's not in these line items, and then like Greg was saying, just separately accounted for somewhere else, just to show it was COVID related. If we're not even showing it here, which I think is what Chief Rogowski had just mentioned, that some of his additional salaries or whatever that he's spending isn't showing on this because they're tracking it separately. It should show on this. Because it's still an expense we're spending that isn't showing on an expense report. Even if we classify it in a whole nother section to say we're doing it because of COVID, at least it's on this report and we know the total amount of money we spent this year compared to the budget.
Because if that was 50,000, we got to pay it until we get reimbursed, and reimbursement will be a percentage, not all.
Yeah, so that's correct. So
We'd like to have an idea.
I can talk with Jean and have her make sure that it shows up in the reports moving forward, or there's a separate report for it. So we'll take care of that.
Separate's fine.
And you're right, Greg. Yeah. So until we get to the point where we can apply for reimbursement, because as I've talked about the past meetings, there's 3 different pools of possible funding right now. There's the DPH, which we already have the money for. We got the money, now we spend it. The second is MEMA. MEMA, we cannot submit for reimbursement until the whole COVID-19 thing is over, so there's no partial reimbursements. And that will be at the rate of 75%. But then there's the CARES Act, which no one understands as of last week how those funds are going to come to the community, be dispersed, or how they're going to have to be applied or expended. So, yes, I will work with Jean and make sure we have that so everyone understands where their numbers are.
I don't expect it to be a huge number. I don't think we'd even get to 50 on it, but we should just be prepared for it and understand it's coming. We have to pay that initial bill till the reimbursement's coming.
Yeah, I don't know how high we're going to get on it. I know after about a month, a little bit more than that, we're already up to about 15,000 in expenses for COVID-19. So
Here's something I'd like to bring up, because I don't know if we've done it properly, taken the right steps, but we still have a budget. This isn't like a blanket opening to just keep spending money and hope you get reimbursed. There is no approval for a cap of the amount of money we can spend on this. We did have a $10,000 emergency fund that we could allocate towards this that would show only a $5,000 current deficit. But I think we need to double check and dot our I's and cross our T's to make sure that any of our overages that are being done, we know that we can legally do it, not just do it because we think we should. But a lot of times, if a town runs into an unexpected expense, they got to go to a special town meeting to get the funding. I don't know the rules here, but I don't want to assume we can just keep spending money towards COVID without some type of town approval of what we're spending. So we've got to look at what we do have from town approval and use that first. Technically, that is the $10,000 expense line item, the emergency expense line item. I would suggest right now, we'll probably send that to the finance committee and make a request that that 10,000 get moved over towards a specific COVID-related account. And we start accounting against that based on what we've spent and what's been approved. We may also want to look at other line items here that we're not going to use and ask for that transfer to help fill that so that it doesn't look to the town that we're just spending money that we may not actually be authorized to spend. But if we review, the finance committee does have the opportunity to review certain accounts and move money from one to the other to fill in a gap to create this so that the whole annual town budget as a whole doesn't come back to the town later outside of snow and ice and look like we have a deficit we got to make up for. Because technically, I would need a little legal advice, whether it's from Heather or from a lawyer. But right now, just because it's a state of emergency, I don't know how that fits into whether we can just keep spending money because, I mean, there's reasons why other towns are putting people on furlough, and I think that might have been to make sure that they could deal within their annual budget, not just because they couldn't come up with a way to keep people working from home. So please, yes, review that and explain that to me.
So this is just real quick. So one of the things I've been doing is we often refer over to KP Law just because they do such a nice job of consolidating the information for all of the different pieces of legislation that keep passing. So this one had to do with one of the municipal acts from early April. And this just talks briefly about the FY20 budget deficit. So if the current COVID-19 related state of emergency results in deficit spending in fiscal year 2020, the act permits a town
Amortize it.
to this deficit over the next 3 years. So essentially, it allows you to overspend just that. It allows you to overspend the budget if you need to because of the emergency. My second recommendation, in addition to allowing that, and I'm happy to get more clarification, I can even get a written legal opinion if you would put the select board at ease. But the other piece is I would strongly recommend not touching the reserve fund for FinCom because that still is really the only funds that we have to access if there's an emergency. So what I keep freaking out about, and Claire knows this, and Brian knows this because they keep going to FinCom, is they say, how's everything going? Good. What are you concerned about? I'm concerned about the HVAC system at the Henry Woods building. I'm concerned that something's going to happen and we're going to be expending a significant amount of money that's close to, the 10,000 or who knows how much. But it would just, to me, I'm happy to get a quick decision on this or opinion. I could look to Jim Bard or anyone the board would like me to look to. I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and understands that, whether or not the town is able to continue to spend, even if it means it's going into the negative on these things, because it is a state of emergency for the safety. I think in many ways it's very similar to snow and ice spending. We tell Jason at the DPW to be, cognitive about what he's spending, but at the same time, we put public safety first. Same thing with the COVID-19 state of emergency is we're really putting that as this is a priority and these are things that have to happen. So I think that's why, we shouldn't necessarily consider ourselves restricted to the current budget items because we are going to go over. Our numbers are going to be higher.
Heather, I'm glad you brought these up because I was literally about to say these same things. First of all, I don't want to deplete the emergency account because that's for other emergencies. And second was, I was sure I saw this somewhere that I read that we could deficit fund and amortize it for 3 years. So if we're allowed to deficit fund, we should do the deficit spending, keep that reserve, that emergency fund if something comes up that's not COVID related, because then if we spend it, we'd have no way to go in a deficit for something that's not COVID related. So we need the 10,000 to stay and definitely just, we can cover the COVID or we can amortize it. I knew I saw it somewhere.
Did you hear me? Can anybody hear me?
Go ahead. I hear you.
All right. A majority of the COVID expenses so far that Gene has have come from fire and EMS, and a majority of that was for medical supplies that the state protocol changed and we didn't have that we had to buy. And initially, was for the purchase of the PPE, the personal protective equipment that we didn't have, and the state didn't have at the time. We're at a point now where we're pretty well stocked, so I don't foresee, at least on the EMS side, spending a whole lot more, pending that this emergency goes on, hopefully is done by the fall, that we shouldn't have to spend too much more out of that account. I'm pretty sure that a majority of that spending has come from my budget.
Well, I got another question regarding the $10,000 emergency. I understand the intent was to roll it over year after year if necessary, but there's also a part of me saying there's no greater cost emergency that's going to hit this town right now than COVID. So why we wouldn't spend it on these items, especially if it could be reimbursed maybe 75% by MEMA, and then rolled back in to cover next year's emergency account line item, then, I mean, it's May. So what if the boiler dies at Henry Woods building? You don't need to heat the building for the next 2 months. You might have a cold day here or there, but that's not something I would hold this 10,000 back on. That's a capital investment.
We have an electrical issue, an air conditioning issue, a roof leak someplace.
Yeah.
There's a plethora of things that could always go wrong, and 10,000 is not a
There's
lot.
a town maintenance account to cover like a roof leak or these things that you're talking about. 10,000 was for major repairs, not incidental repairs to keep it going.
Right, but moving $10,000 just to not have a 15,000 negative to call it a 5 negative, it's irrelevant. We can do that in June without any repercussions and still keep the safety bank of the 10,000. We're not going to spend any more or less money to do this, but keeping the reserve where it's supposed to be, we should do. The government's created for us a deficit funding ability to take care of the COVID issues. So we don't need to go to a normal emergency fund for this. There's a fund allowed to be run. It's called the deficit fund. We're allowed to run it for the COVID. We can fund it June 30th and when the COVID's done, however we want to. Be it free cash, stabilization, budgeted for 3 years, take the 10,000, whatever we want to do, but we don't have to do it now. So I'd rather leave the 10,000 and have that cushion because you never know what happens. Thunderstorms come through. I mean, who knows? I mean, that's why it's there.
That 10,000 is always left to the end of the year, whatever is left. And then it's there so that you can, if a budget line has gone over, you can use that money for that. Otherwise, it'll roll over and then you fund it the next year. It's not an account that keeps rolling over and over. It's gone as of June 30th. But
Yeah,
you
it
need
becomes
it
free
there.
cash if you don't spend it.
But you can spend it on your budgets that have gone over. And you never know what's going to happen. Like Greg said, you just don't know. And I don't think it's very good to be paying off the deficit that the government has allowed you to spend for the COVID. If you start paying off the COVID bills, then the government could look at you and say,
You don't need it.
hey, they don't need the money. So just go with it and see what
The
happens.
government's reviewing your expenses, not your revenues. What did it cost you to deal with COVID? Doesn't matter if you use your emergency account or your original annual budget and you just quit spending money over here, but you focused it on COVID. Kind of like what you presented in the beginning of this segment of the meeting was freeze expenses because we don't know where we're going to have to move this money elsewhere. It's still a COVID expense, even if it originally was planned to, fix the roof on the gazebo. But we said, don't do that. We're going to use the money over here. It's still a COVID expense that's being used over here. So from my perspective, we're in an emergency.
This isn't an emergency.
$10,000 line item was to cover emergency expenses. It's how we develop the entire budget. I mean, so the whole annual budget still includes the 10,000. So when we presented it last year to people, it was expected 10,000 might get used. So that's all I'm saying. I mean, if we had another problem, it still goes to finance committee, and you can go to any other line item in the budget and transfer over to cover an
No, you don't do that way, Matt. That isn't how accounting goes.
What are you talking? What do you mean? No, please explain, because maybe we're not connecting correctly.
This isn't an emergency. This is the COVID, and the state has set a method for us to deal with it.
Yeah.
That fund is for something we have no other way to deal with. Something comes up that we have no way to fund it. That's what the 10,000's for.
We are in a state of emergency. That's what they call it.
And they made a method for us to deal with those funds and that debt.
It's a state emergency. It's not a town emergency.
Actually, we did, I believe, at some point, the Board of Selectmen identified as a town emergency so that we could fit into the MEMA and all the state funding mechanisms. But just to clarify, what I'm trying to say here is, we just hold it to the end of the year and then transfer it. It's no different than transferring it now.
Then let's wait.
And if we hold it to the end of the year and don't use it, all I'm saying is,
But you don't have to
There's
pay
no harm
that
if we don't use
COVID.
you don't have to pay it?
Not now, you don't. Why waste it there? We may need it somewhere else. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 months.
Because I believe every bill you wait to pay next year costs you more than paying it now. That's where I'm coming
But
from.
we're not going to pay that.
We get to
The
June
government
30th,
is
we pay
paying
it.
COVID.
We take it June 30th, Matt, that's all.
And that's fine, Greg.
If we
I'm
don't
willing
need it
to-
June 30th.
I just wanted to discuss,
Yeah.
from my perspective, I'm really trying to say, I know we're going to have more costs. But let's look at our budget and squeeze it. Don't treat this. I mean, Greg, you and I kind of, I don't want to say have the same debate, but take the same approach with snow removal every year. A lot of times people just say, have the Board of Selectmen just give a blanket statement, you can go into deficit. But we go back and say, no, give a dollar figure. You can't go more than this.
Let's try to get there, right?
So
The
I'm
COVID's
saying we
different.
have a budget. Let's try to stay within it.
And the COVID's
If we
different.
move the money to cover the debt, we're at least showing how much of within the debt we actually have stayed in. You
Right,
know,
but look at-
I mean, how much of the budget we've used to address this and not just left the deficit account line item sitting there while we have money unspent somewhere else.
Let me take a different approach then, Matt. I'll say again, the COVID money we're allowed to deficit, and it's not us being irresponsible with our budget. This is a COVID expense, it's unforeseen. That's why we're tracking it separately. But if we do have shortfalls and we do have other overages in other departments, that's what this money can be for in June. Then we take the money in June, we apply it to some of those to keep those overages down. But if we just take it and whip it out now, we don't know if something comes up. We can, now or later, doesn't matter. By keeping it in its own account now, it just gives us the ability of, just in case, it's a cheap insurance policy. We already have the money there. It's just insurance. Come June, we apply it to one of those other things. We spend it in last year's budget to keep the money down.
Like if we need repairs on an ambulance, a fire truck, right, Rob?
But if we do move the money out now, for example, then it makes people feel like, oh, we're not as bad off as we thought, because look, this 10,000 just came in. We don't want that 10,000 in the picture. We want it out of the picture. We want the budgets tight and stay tight. Then when June comes, then we'll take the 10,000 and utilize it where we have to. But I don't want anyone to feel like they've got cash in their pocket because we freed up an extra 10 grand. That's if the crap hits a fan, we have it. And if we don't need it, hopefully in any of the budgets, then we can apply it to the COVID expense and start working it down and have less to amortize or pay off later. But there's no literal advantage to moving that money now. There's a possible benefit if something should arise to hold on to it. But to pay it down in something in a couple months, really, there's no advantage to do it now versus 2 months from now. We're not like accruing interest on things that we're, taking on thousands of dollars of extra interest or something silly. It's $10,000. If we have a balance from the COVID for 2 months, it's not going to hurt us. And the benefit
Brian,
of
do
having
you
the
have
money in reserves-
anything?
Yeah.
An opinion on this?
Yeah, I would love to. I agree with Greg. In every other year that I've been on the committee, for quite a few years actually, we've waited until the last meeting of the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen before the town meeting to transfer any of these funds, because we never know what's going to be overspended or overspent. So I'm in favor of keeping it in there until the very end, and then make the transfer. There's no point. There's no real advantage to doing it right now. That's it.
Good enough?
Okay, so Greg, you said you had already put a freeze on spending? I don't have any record that you voted to.
I think we gotta put it to a vote again, Greg. I think we discussed, but I don't remember taking the vote.
Yeah, I think you discussed it, and then we did, and
I had thought when we declared the town emergency, we told department heads to freeze their spending. No unnecessary spending, from that date forward. That's what the instruction was. And we told them if they do buy things, if we don't authorize the purchase, we will take it out of the warrant and we won't pay things.
yeah,
And I've been looking every time in the warrant to make sure there's nothing in there because I'll pull it. So
because I didn't
wanna take
have
another
any
vote,
record
great.
of that.
We've already instructed department heads not to do it. And I would fully intend to pull anything out of the warrant that I see as an unnecessary purchase.
Just for the record, I'd just like to make a motion that we freeze all expenses, unnecessary expenses. I don't know if we feel like we should put a dollar cap on that though. Like anything over $100. I mean, how do we define unnecessary
Operating.
expenses?
Normal operating expenses and any purchases should have to be approved by the board or we could say by the administrator. Would I be comfortable with?
If you put in there that you have to, the board has to approve it when you sign the warrant. Let them know that it'll be pulled off if it's unnecessary.
And any purchases should be cleared through the administrator because they must be approved by the board.
We can't do that at the warrant level though, because we've already had the town extend themselves, and usually by that time we're getting an invoice for something we've either already purchased, used, or received.
Yeah,
So we put the town in a tight spot with any of our vendors if we do it after the fact. So that's where I'm suggesting that we got to kind of look at any expense over a certain dollar value needs to go before. And I wouldn't necessarily say to the Board of Selectmen because we don't meet daily, and it might be
Yeah.
something that needs
It's just
some.
gonna be run by Heather.
So it's either the DPW superintendent or the town administrator has to approve
town administrator.
expense over $200, $500.
I think two. There's a lot of purchases that the water and sewer department make for chemicals and things, but those are routine. Those shouldn't count. It should be
Something,
something outside of normal operating purchase.
Yeah.
I trust they all know what that means.
So
Jason knows what it means. Bob knows what it means. Everybody knows what that means.
yeah,
They have to have it. If it's not a must-have operating expense and it's over $200, they have to get approval from Heather before spending. That means her signature has to be on a form before they ask for payment and send a check.
So I make a motion that all expenses are frozen over $200 without either the approval of the town administrator or the DPW superintendent.
Just the
no, just
administrator.
Heather.
Everything goes through Heather.
But the
You better
DPW
have-
superintendent doesn't answer to Heather.
No, but the
So let's
warrant
not
and the
create
bills
that
go
issue
through
again.
there. The warrant and the bills have to go through here.
That doesn't make a difference because again, when I see the warrant, it's only the Board of Selectmen I see signing off, not Heather.
But she's going to now, before you get it.
We have no control over Jason's actions day to day. That's a DPW commission. We have total control of the town's finances with the finance committee. That's everything. Every penny goes through our signature. And given we make this, we have to present a budget. We make the budget. We tell the town departments what they're going to get ultimately. We approve their spending of it as it goes. And we have every right to say that we're going to have to look at all these. We have the budget that goes to DPW, it goes to library, it goes to everyone. A library commission runs a library, we still sign the checks.
Yeah.
The DPW commission runs a DPW, but we sign the checks. The water commission, sewer commission run those. Enterprise fund, kind of different, but we really can't tell them how to spend the enterprise fund, but we do still sign those checks. I think to have everything approved through Heather is just a one-stop. Done.
You can second and modify the motion if you'd like.
I'd second the motion with the modification that the approvals are through Heather.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Call for vote.
O'Sullivan, yes?
Clark, yes.
Urban, yes.
And once again, this is more of a clarification. No one's done it yet. I think they all understood what we asked a month ago. And I don't think anybody's going to have any weird expenditures. But this just cleans it up and keeps it simple. They just give Heather a buzz and say, this happened. We really kind of need this, and figure out need or want if it's okay. And we could probably ask Heather if something is a serious purchase like 500 or more, she comes to us. Unofficially, just say, that's going to get big. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think any other, anything that big is going to be only requested if they need it. A piece of equipment breaks or that they need to use or,
The other thing we discussed too was on a freeze on hiring. This is to hold the budget down as much as we can for this year and for next year, for a while anyways, until we see where the COVID's going to go. Except for the new town administrator, and there's the it's a building
Building
inspector?
commissioner?
Yeah, that's the other one. Except for those two, but any others, there should be a freeze on it for now, just to hold the costs down. The finance
Leave
committee
that under
voted on it
advisement.
Thursday.
We can't advertise for new positions without it going through the Board of Selectmen anyway. So we can take that as a case-by-case basis with the recommendation from the Finance Committee.
Yeah, there's some spots we may not be willing to go without, other ones we may. So I'd agree. I'd rather wait and do it case by case.
Yeah, but as long as
I hear you, Claire. You're right. You're right.
we're
That's a
trying
good
to
way
hold
of
that line
efficient
down.
works.
Heather? You raised your hand?
So the only clarification I need, so I just started the process of posting for the seasonal laborer for the DPW. Should I be continuing with that?
Do we
can
need
still
them?
take the applications.
Yeah, we'll have to take that up at the DPW meeting and see what kind of crew he can deal with. We got to keep up with mowing. You can't let hayfields grow.
Yeah.
And the DPW, unfortunately, we're like with the sidewalks and the roads, and we have a lot of tasks that we really need to get done. So they may need some of those, maybe not all three, but they might need one or two. If we can do with less, let's. But I think we got to ask the commission next week.
Revisit that like you said, Greg, next week with the DPW Commission.
Okay, so I'm continuing with the posting steps are already in at this point with the newspaper and the website, and then you guys will discuss later. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just so you know, what the finance committee is trying, we're trying to keep that budget as low as we can
We
to get
appreciate
us
it.
through.
We appreciate it. Like I said, we should have the free cash this year, but I'd rather not burn it all up. I'd like to try to, if we can clip our spending by $50,000, that'd be beautiful.
Yeah,
Um,
you know, whatever we can cut, each little thing. We met with the police chief, and we're gonna meet with the fire chief, and then the DPW, the town clerk, council on aging, and the library. And we're trying to see where they can level fund. So the police chief came in and was no problem. I thought we might have to try to squeeze something out, but we didn't have to. He was great.
Who's going to ask the school to level fund?
We're
I'm
gonna
not
ask
laughing.
all of them.
I'm not
I
laughing.
had a note. Yeah,
I'm not kidding.
I had a note on here about
School committee members should.
Yeah, that they're there for that.
Well,
I was curious about the school on what monies they may have left from this year, because they've got to not have spent everything.
I think
And what happens then? Would
unfortunately,
that money
I think
come back to us, or would they hold it for next year?
knowing
what?
school systems as I do, I believe they have a use it or lose it mentality, and they will find a way to spend it. I would be shocked if they had any, would go either hit their excess and deficiency, or they're going to spend it. I would hope that they purchase, like a lot of school systems, Chromebooks to hand out to students so they can do work at home, to loan out.
Yeah, I know they did that.
And they should be
My
paying for
grandson.
Zoom and making sure the teachers are getting different, classroom scenarios set up, which costs money for them to establish and buy into these things. So I'm sure they're spending this money. They still have to keep the school heated, keep it clean, mow the property. They still have to have a janitorial staff. I'm sure the administrators are still in, because they still have to start budgeting for next year. They have to take care of all the complications that are going on for this. So I would be shocked if they offered any sort of rebate to us. Absolutely shocked.
I was thinking myself of maybe contacting the school committee members and asking,
I did
Yes,
notice
they
on the
can.
FY21 budget that one of their largest increases was in their IT/technical services area. I think that was almost a 29% increase from last year. So even this is prior to COVID, they were presenting that number. So whatever they've spent, like Greg may have mentioned, on Chromebooks and other things,
Right off of that line item.
in its own way is only going to continue to justify the increase in that operational line item, because they will have to update all of their software licenses, maintain them, make sure they have personnel in place to keep all the upgrades in place, and teach their students how to do it. So
I would hope that's how they're applying their excess budget this year, is towards those, and bring that line item number down.
Heather,
Heather had her hand up again.
Thanks. So I just wanted to let the board know, I did have the opportunity to tune in to a meeting with the superintendent of schools on Friday, with a couple of the other folks in the district, and we're actually going to meet again this Friday on Zoom. And what we had chatted a little bit about was some of those questions. Are there going to be any funds that are likely to come back to the municipalities? How much would it be? How would it come back? What is their E&D looking like? Guidance, and what information are they getting from DESE? What are they looking at for additional funding sources? And then we spent quite a bit of time talking about the municipal side. How, there's lots of unknowns right now. There's not a lot of information coming down from the state on revenues for next year. How most communities right now are getting prepped for the possibility of having to do 1/12 budgeting. How that would drastically affect the schools, how the towns are all looking at doing level funding budgets and all of those pieces. So we're trying, I don't know if it was very successful, but at least I felt a little bit better after the call, that we're trying to open up the lines of communication with the superintendent. So we're talking back and forth and giving them an impression of where everyone currently is, so that they keep hearing the same thing over and over, that the municipalities were already struggling with the funding, the amount that they had originally submitted for the assessments before COVID-19. After COVID-19, forget it. So they did assure us that that was not in any which way their final budget. It was just a work in progress. But my understanding is that the school committee, I believe it's meeting tomorrow night. I'm not sure if I have the right night. So many meetings. But they are meeting this week, and we are Wednesday. Thanks, Dylan. We're supposed to be checking back in with the superintendent of schools, because we also, on the municipal side, many of the small communities are participating in a region or statewide call with someone from Division of Local Services tomorrow, hoping to get more guidance on what their recommendations are to the municipalities for funding and so forth. So we'll see how that goes. Claire, our treasurer and collector, treasurer, collector, and our accountant are all going to be on that call as well. So we're hoping to absorb as much information and hopefully get some answers.
Excellent.
Okay, let's see what else I had on here. Now the FY21, we're asking everybody to try to level fund their budget as much as they can. And we're preparing a budget without the 2% COLA on it, in hopes that we can still give it to them. And the police chief said he would level fund his budget, and he hoped other departments would too, without any problem, so that we could give the employees the 2%. Because it all depends what that last number is, what it comes in at. So to let you know what we're working in, we'll work it with a 2% and one without, so that if we're really in bad shape, if there's nothing else we could do. But I think with them, level funding budgets, it will help.
The union pay raises are already guaranteed. So those are very predictable. And they represent probably 60% or more, 65% of the town employees. 65% are getting it. I think we should press hard to make sure the balance get it.
Well, I agree too, but we've got to have an alternative in case we can't.
I think there's a little caveat to that, Greg, only because June 30th ends the current 3-year union contracts. So at town meeting, approval of the budget, the first year is the first time that approves the salaries within the next 3-year contract. I know DPW, we just settled on, and the board all kind of reviewed and agreed to move forward with that. I don't know where the police are in their negotiations, but I'm not quite sure how the first year of a contract applies to guaranteed salaries, or if that's where the town's voice comes into play and they can deny something. I just don't know enough about it, so I'm just throwing it out there, Greg. I understood that that's the case after the first annual town meeting of the first year of a contract passes. The next 2 years of the contract are set in stone and you can't deviate. I don't know how that varies right now leading into a new contract term. So there may be something where the town can come back and say, we don't accept what you just approved, and I'm not sure how that process works. So that might be something, Heather, we do need to follow up with Fred on, just to confirm what negotiated contract labor rates would be in this first year, because obviously normally we just go with it, but this is an odd year where we negotiated, say, the DPW contract and approved it before COVID hit. So there was no kind of like, oh, should we back off in what we're discussing versus. So I think we should get a little input from Fred on that before we are 100% firm on what the rates are going into next year. But generally, I want to give it to him because that's what we negotiated. So I'm not trying to back out of it. I just don't know if a weird rule comes into play and we're operating on a false premise.
Well, we figure if we do it both ways, but just to let the Board of Selectmen know that that's what we're trying to do.
Curious to see the difference in the budget both ways.
Yeah,
How
Yeah,
it is.
and see what we
don't think
come
it's
in
that
with at the end of the year too, when it gets closer.
Yeah.
I have another thing that came up at the Finance Committee where there is possibility more money. Because Jean was saying that the Chapter 90s money hasn't come in like it should be.
Yeah, I wouldn't hold our
There's
breath
some
on it.
delays in the process.
And, well, she said all projects were completed in November. Right, Heather? Isn't that what she said?
Seems about
And
right.
yeah, and the projects get completed. I asked her how it works. I didn't have any idea. And she said the paperwork has to go in, which, is it Sharon that's down there? No, what's the girl's
Shannon.
name?
Shannon,
Opinions
help
at
Okay,
put it
Shannon.
together.
the treasurer's office.
Yeah. She puts all the paperwork together, all the invoices and everything as it's completed. And then I guess Jason goes through it and sends it in. She said he'd only sent in one set, which they were waiting for 300,000 to come back. But there's another set that should be going in that they're working on. She said there's $1 million in all. And they should be going in quicker than they are so that we have that money quicker.
I do have some information on that I'm not saying it changes your perception of it, but the original delay, which is closer to 400,000, not 300,000, that first package, my understanding, it started with work 2018. We did some road work, and then the state came in and froze our Chapter 90 funds until we addressed the Canesto Brook Bridge. We did what we had to get the bridge fixed, and once that finally cleared and the state allowed us to, they froze our Chapter 90 funds until we addressed the bridge. So until we went through the whole process of the bridge repair was completed, inspected, and approved, we couldn't make requests on even the previous work and road work we had done to receive funds from Chapter 90 to pay for previous work. So we had some previous road work and the bridge work that all got held up until the state approved the bridge work. My understanding is the town did attempt to submit after that package or series of packages for reimbursement. And I think the state asked them to revise how they submitted. They may have submitted it all in one big package. And then the state said, please separate the bridge work from the road work. I don't recall. But I think they had to resubmit it at least a second time. I cannot explain all the delays, but my understanding is they finally got that package approved. And I had heard that the state had released a check for that first 400,000 about 2 to 3 weeks ago. So it's either in the mail, in our mailbox, or sitting on a desk waiting to be deposited in a bank. But that first check, the state has released the check. Where it's at and where it's gone from there, I don't know. I also understand the next package is being submitted likely this week. They just had to get the invoices for a couple items together. And all of that funding should be received by the end of the fiscal year. So the entire history of back reimbursements on Chapter 90 should be caught up to all the completed work to date by the end of this fiscal year.
So that would be the work that was through November that Jean was talking about.
So that total value of approximate $1 million, I believe should be probably by the end of May, but definitely by the end of the fiscal year. We should receive the checks from the state.
So that will help us.
Yes, and that's a cash flow thing, I understand.
Because Jean gets worried about writing the checks, paying stuff out.
Yeah.
And she said, when I know that there's money due to come in, if we could. So she asked if I would bring it up at the selectmen so that find out what's going on.
So that's what I understand, Claire.
Okay. So I think that's all I've got, unless there's something.
I see Jason's on.
Oh, yeah, there he is.
So Jason, we just talked about Chapter 90 funding. And I just kind of explained a little of the one check has been sent by the state, another check, we should be sending the reimbursement package soon. But if you want to kind of restate that quickly just for the record, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure, Matt. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, perfect. If you guys recall, the first reimbursement section, it was projects that we had put in for, we got approval for, and then all the money was held up because of the bridge work. too. So all that stuff is all cleared up. I spoke to the Chapter 90 rep, and he said that was already paid to the town. I just think that the treasurer has not posted that to the town's books yet. I'm unsure why. He said that was paid out a little bit ago. The new submittal will be going in. That was for $400,000. The first check. The next one's for $500 and something. The next reimbursement, that paperwork's all completed. We just need the cleared checks from the uptown offices, which I can get from Gene, and we'll get that put in hopefully this week. You guys still hear me okay? Or?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, my phone's making a funny noise. Just want to make sure it's not messing up. The other thing I would like to just clarify is I heard at the last meeting they said something about the town of Barre employees wouldn't be getting a raise because of this, because the Chapter 90 money wasn't reimbursed. I think one of the biggest problems we have in town is people that don't pay their taxes and don't pay their water and sewer bills. You know, stuff that doesn't get paid. I don't think our problem's coming in. Our money always comes back. We always have it back before the next fiscal year. There was some holdups in this particular batch. I think, before information is said like that at a meeting, maybe the people should be informed of what's going on. I also would like to say that I don't believe I ever been contacted by one person from the FinCom. If they felt they had any questions about any of this, I'm pretty sure all of them have the number to the Barre DPW. They're more than welcome to call that, leave a message. I'd be more than happy to get back to them. I think there's all kinds of things that were done improperly. And I think also before FinCom makes any statements like that saying that they're not going to give the town of Barre employees raises, I believe they just make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, and it's got nothing to do with them making decisions. So,
Jay, no one said we're not giving employees raises.
I watched the meeting and I saw that on there. You didn't say that, Greg, but FinCom did.
I specifically said I want to make sure everyone gets it, and we're just getting
Jason.
comparisons. Because I don't think taking Coca-Cola out saves us much money. They're going to give us both numbers to figure us that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I watched
Jason,
the meeting and I heard what was said.
Jason, we never said that. We are trying to come down with a downline budget that we can be able to pay for the town.
Mm-hmm. I understand
That's why
that.
we're asking for level funded budgets, hoping that it will give us enough so we can do a 2%. If we can cut in other places, then we can do that. But there's only just so much money.
Right.
And that's what anywhere where we can pick up money, that's what Gene brought up. That I know nothing about how the Chapter 90 monies work, and Matt just explained it, which was good.
Right.
I don't know how it comes in, but it's money that will be coming in, so that finance committee can kind of sit back and say, okay, we know we got this money coming in, so it may help us.
Yep.
And we want to give the employees their raise. They're working hard, especially now. Brian, would you like to say something? Brian's on here. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't.
Hello. Yeah, no, I agree with what Claire's saying. We were just, when we heard the figure $1 million, we were kind of flabbergasted. I know I was. And I think the comment was made that here we are discussing 2% raise for the employees, and we got $1 million on the string. So I think now that we know what's going on, I mean, maybe we should have waited until the meeting that Jason was at, because he's going to be asked to be at one of our meetings. Maybe we should have waited until then to bring up the subject, but it was just kind of really a big number that we were excited about at the time.
Yep, I can understand that. We spend anywhere between 400 and 700,000 a year on Chapter 90 projects, and I don't recall any issues we've ever had with not getting our reimbursements back in a timely manner before the money would affect our next fiscal year's budget. I also think you guys should review that meeting and watch it again and see what was said. So.
Well, at least I want everyone to understand, because I don't want anyone to get hot-tempered here. This is a discussion, trying to pre-plan for expenses, budgets, what we think might happen. And Jay, everything's on the board to talk about because we're talking about it. But rest assured, you heard my opinion, and I think the other selectmen agree. We don't want to. Matt even said, "I want to give everyone the raise too." He said that verbatim, but they're just considering everything right now. Nobody wants to not give a pay raise. Absolutely. That's
yeah.
And I also believe, I said, we may have shortcomings. Like we're anticipating between $100,000 and $200,000 total the fiscal year in the end. But those shortcomings that come from water, sewer, from excise tax and property tax, those shortcomings will be made up for in the first and second quarter next year, because people aren't going to lose their properties because they're behind on these things. People will catch up, and these will come to us. They're going to come late. So we're going to have a crunch this year. We're going to keep it as tight as we can next year because we don't know when those monies will come in. But I believe they will come in, and I believe we'll be okay when we get through next year. Our biggest unknown is going to be what the state does, because we have no idea what they're going to do with their money next year.
Right.
And that's going to largely depend on what the Fed does. And it's an unknown. We all got to be prepared to get slapped here. And we're hoping no one does.
I think you're absolutely correct. There's a lot of unknown things that are coming along with everything that's going on here.
If you caught the early conversation, Jason, lots of towns are giving furloughs. They're setting down workers all over the place to cut costs. And we right off the bat said, no, we're going to pay everyone. And when we talked about someone sick, I suggested that if someone's sick, we send them home and pay them. We're not going to screw around with, if they're COVID, did we send them? Did they stay? Do they have sick time? We are making a hard stance for our employees from the beginning of this, and I hope everyone sees that, because we're not going to furlough anybody.
Greg, just for a little bit of clarification, I think you select people you're doing a very good job the way you're handling things. I was a little disappointed with the improper information being projected out there from the FinCom, where they never once contacted me. So, like I said, if you guys want, I can forward you guys all my email address and the number to the office. So if you guys have questions, you can contact me at any time. Just before you guys go making statements, I want to make sure you have the correct information. And the other question I have is I received a couple of messages about the spending freeze and the dollar amount. I heard that you guys want to put a spending freeze on anything over $200. Just so you guys are aware, pretty much everything I purchase on a daily basis is over $200.
Outside of normal operating expenses, Jay. And
Okay.
that's part of why I said
just-
the water sewer buys stuff all the time that's expensive. Anything outside of normal operating, you know, if you're buying a new tool or new equipment, not fixing something, maintaining something, or regular materials purchases you need, not that stuff.
Okay. All right. So you're talking anything that's outside of the regular budgeted item.
Yeah, oh, I was gonna buy new socket sets a week. It's $400 of the socket set. That's a hell no.
Right. No, obviously we're not spending excessive money, but we're going to spend money on anything we need to do day-to-day operations. That's all. I just
Which
wanted
is what-
clarification on that because,
Right, we had a vote just to clarify, because we already discussed this a month ago, and you guys have all been doing a great job sticking to the required expenses, I think. Yeah, but we just wanted to clarify it officially, because we never voted on it when we made that request a month ago.
excellent. Thank you very much for the clarification, Greg. I appreciate it.
We appreciate the clarification on the funds, and I know Claire didn't mean any offense, Jay. We're pressuring them, unfortunately, to come here to our meeting and try to give us numbers. And I'll take the blame as much as anybody for the statements, because they're meeting with you soon, and we're pushing for them for suggestions when they're really not ready for it, and that's as much my fault as anybody's, because we're just trying to get ahead of this. They didn't mean any offense, I know that, and I don't want to see any risks with any of our townspeople. You know, we're all in this together for Barre here, and nobody means any harm to anyone.
Well, that's the biggest thing I want to get across here to anybody that has questions. To feel free to reach out and contact the people that are in the know and know what are going on before, you know, any statements are made. That's the only thing I ask. You know what I mean? That's just the only thing we can do.
Duly noted by me.
I think we are all, like you said, Greg, we're all in this for the town of Barre. I know I personally, you know, go to work every day with the best interest of the town in mind, and we try to keep the townspeople as happy as possible. That's not always 100% able to be done, but that's what we do. We go to work, we pay our taxes, we pay our bills, and we go on from there.
Just so you know, Jason, the finance committee, we have to look at it from all sides, so that we're looking at numbers when we're looking at it. And that's what we're supposed to be doing for the town and for the betterment of the town and everything we can.
Mm-hmm.
And if the COLA can go in, great. But we have to look at where we might be able to find something. And like department heads, if they can give us a clue as to where we can maybe cut some things, that's great. We'd appreciate it very much.
Claire, one thing
So,
I would
you
like
know,
to
if
say,
you come up with any ideas that might be able to cut a little here or there to get us through this year, then that would be wonderful.
right?
I'm open
I
to
think
any.
you guys also need to remember that myself personally, since I've been in charge of DPW, we've been level funded every year except for 2, I believe, and that was just because we added some additional employees that were cut years ago. So we're always a level funded budget, and we make do what we have. I get a really good crew that works really hard. You know, we always get the job done with the very minimal tools and you know, resources to do so. So just, you know, before you guys go that, I would just appreciate the courtesy if you have a question about my department to ask us first before you make statements. That's all.
To that end, we discussed earlier the seasonal hires, maybe reducing the number for this year to try to keep our numbers back. And that's going to be something we're going to discuss at the DPW meeting, just give you a heads up to start thinking about it. Figure out how many seasonal workers we really need to get and not hire more people. We're debating about, you know, if we lose personnel, not replacing them at this point right now until we know what the finances are next year.
Right. I think that's an okay idea too, Greg. I spoke to Heather the other day.
Monday, not now.
Yeah.
Next
month. No, absolutely. I spoke to Heather about that position the other day, and we do speak. I do believe it's an important thing to have done. Obviously, we want to make sure stuff is maintained. I don't think there's any harm with cutting it back a little bit. I think that's a great idea.
Right. We'll do that next Monday. But Matt, we ought to move on. I'm happy we had this dialogue, but we got to keep going. We'll be here all night.
Yeah, thank you guys for letting me in here and getting to speak.
Glad
I got tied up in another meeting earlier, so I just got out of my other meeting.
Appreciate it much.
Magical.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, so Claire,
The
this
only
is your last chance to say anything about finance.
well, this is about capital.
Okay.
We know, we're going for the ambulance, the 285, which Jean was saying, of course, won't be paying for that until next spring. So that's a thing. But the chief, police chief, wants his car. He really needs one because one of them is really. Brian, maybe you can explain about what he talked about the car.
No, I mean,
Right.
he just explained that we've actually put in the plan that he would replace a car every year. So, other than that, I don't really know what the condition of the car is.
I
But
can tell you one of the cars, the driver's side window doesn't open because when they pull up to get a cup of coffee somewhere, they got to open the door to get it.
then
So,
that needs to be.
I'm just explaining, we aren't working with necessarily a complete fleet that's working appropriately yet.
Yeah, that's
Right.
what he had said.
The fleet was completely depleted when we took over a couple of years ago. Literally, no, we put the fleet had to be 100% replaced 3 years ago when I came into office. There was nothing good in that fleet. So I think he needs to stick with the car. And the ambulance,
Yeah.
I believe they're still having a lot of issues, and they got to get rid of one of them. And they're running 2
Yeah.
ambulances a lot. That's something that pays
Yeah.
itself back. But
So
We
he
can't
he
shy
had
off.
put in for the cruiser.
we need to stick with our capital plans, I think, and look for our cuts in our budgeting and other things. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I think there's a few things on there that we could. I know Chief Rogowski needs a car. He was talking about that, right, Rob?
What?
Yes, to replace the car too that went permanently out of service in November.
Is that something we can forego this year, Bob, given what we're talking about, and use one of the brush trucks instead of the new truck from Rutland?
Well, in our capital plan, this year we were supposed to replace a brush truck,
Right.
car, and an ambulance. I think we can forego the brush truck. We got the truck from Rutland. It's a pretty decent truck, but it does have some issues that need to be addressed. It's not perfect. So the plan was replace car 1, make that car 2, and that would be the car that is used for if people want to take classes or any sort of business on behalf of the department, and send that, if we have a medical call, that extra person can take that car, do inspections during the day, just make it the general run around everyday car.
I toss out, Bob, maybe you try to keep using the brush truck as a car too for now, and maybe look into a special town meeting that will do this, maybe next fall, do a special town meeting, because I think the monies will come back. We won't know for sure until we get down to the end of this year and do the budget, but think about that if you could, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we knew for a fact we were going to have a special town meeting in the fall, I think it's fine to push it back.
We can do it to discuss specifically that if we need to. I mean, we just didn't do it this year because we didn't have any of these items to discuss. We talked about it and said, why have one just to have one, just to create things? We don't have anything we need, and we didn't do it. But if that's an issue, I think we can look for it. I need the other board members to chime in on that, please.
You want to go, Dylan?
Yeah. Chief Rogowski, how necessary do you think having the brush truck and the car would be?
I mean, the brush truck we've had on the capital plan, I think, every year for the last 10 years, and it's been cut. We did get that one from Rutland. Our other 2 brush trucks are in okay shape. I mean, our town mechanic keeps them going. So I think if we had to cut anything, the brush truck we could cut. The ambulance is a must-have. That definitely, our 2005 needs to be replaced ASAP. And if we can get that other car, that would be important. We do use that car a lot. And the one we had a hole in the frame. We went for inspection, failed, and there was no way to repair it. And it's sitting down at the DPW. That was back in November. And fortunately, Rutland donated their older truck that they were getting rid of, and we've been using that in place, but that does need some work. And
Got a leaking fuel tank, doesn't it?
leaking fuel tank. It's got no glow plugs. There's a few other things that we've just kind of been waiting to get through the brush season before we take it out of service to get prepared. But I mean, definitely the brush truck. If we have to cut one thing, we can cut that brush truck for this year again.
Okay. I'm just curious for your car too. What type of car does it have to be? Is it primarily to it's like a on the road, not necessarily high speed? Is it running 24 hours a day, or is it 2-3 hours a day?
No, it's our old car too was an SUV. Five. Ideally, if we have an incident scene, sometimes we don't need apparatus, we just need people, and it's just something to transport people around. If a member of the department wants to take a class, academy or an EMS class, I try to give them a department vehicle so they're not using their personal vehicles. A lot of times they're not getting paid for those classes, they're doing it on their own free time. So we try to provide a vehicle. Our fire inspector uses it during the day to go around, do his fire inspections. If during the weekend the crew wants to go to the landfill, they take the trash. It's just the general use run around vehicle.
Yeah, I guess my question here is, because it sounds like the majority of the mileage is more passenger mileage.
Yes.
Can we get something that's more fuel efficient? Rather than an SUV or a truck, actually get a car?
I mean, that doesn't really work well in the wintertime, especially on the back roads in Barre. We can get a car, but ideally, if you're going out to the back roads, and we do use this vehicle a lot on medical responses, especially during the day, four-wheel drive is kind of needed, especially in people's driveways in the wintertime.
Well, they do make four-wheel drive cars. I'm just talking about fuel efficiency, Bob. Could we consider something
like
that
a
might be
Subaru or
more
something?
fuel efficient than an SUV?
Like a Subaru, Matt?
A Subaru might be an option. I mean, these days, I've had a pickup for a while, but I understand technology is getting pretty good with all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive cars. And if the majority of the time they're driving is roadway driving, and then it might be worth getting this car too with that purpose in mind. It's not really about off-roading or having to bring 4 or 5 guys to a site or load it up with trash. If a trash run is something where it's just as easy to ask DPW, can you bring up the pickup and load it up with trash and something?
Well, the thing I would say to that, Matt, though, is when we do use it to like run firemen to a scene or something, there's going to be gear and equipment that you usually don't put in the passenger compartment of the vehicle. How much it fit in the trunk versus the back of an SUV or the pickup. And my guess would be, I don't know what's out there, Bob probably knows, but there's always state bid prices. And usually for us, it'd be an SUV that's going to be almost half market price on versus a car that might not be in that category for us. So it may be much less expensive to buy something off the state bid that is an SUV because of the things, if they got to bring a medical bag, or they got to bring a couple sets of fire gear and some water cans or some rakes or some, if you have to bring packs or something, if he's bringing relief personnel to a fire scene and bringing 4 guys and they have, 4 air packs with it, that's a lot of room. It's not going to fit in the trunk of a car. So I can see where the car wouldn't work for a lot of that.
All right. I just figured it was something to ask. Heather?
I I was just gonna say, what I can do for the board is I can add the capital plan to the agenda for the next meeting, because they, the FinCom should be meeting with DPW and fire before the select board meet again. So that'll give an opportunity for them to have more of a formal tune and, some discussions with some of the departments, so that, the select board will have all the information ahead of time to be able to discuss. I did notice we're already at 8:30, and Joshua has been very patiently waiting for us to get to the item for 2 hours that I might have told him would be about 15 minutes into the meeting. So if there was any chance we could get to Joshua.
There's a chance.
Thank you.
All right, then, if you're okay with it, Claire, we'll kind of close the finance discussion for the evening and revisit in a couple weeks at the next Board of Selectmen meeting.
Would help if I unmuted it, right?
Oh, were you talking?
Yeah. It's fine. That was
Thank you very
all that I
much.
had.
And I truly appreciate you attending the meeting tonight to help us out with some of this.
And I hope it was helpful for you too, Claire.
All right, with that said, let's move on to Mr. Joshua Smith and discussions regarding the town meeting and contingency plans, etc. So I'll give you the floor, Josh, if you'd like to present what you want to present.
Just to make sure everyone understands the sort of legal frameworks that we're living in right now, because they're a little weird. The most important thing is that you guys don't have to post a warrant for town meeting until you're ready, right? So there is no strong impetus that says you got to get this thing done on our normal schedules. All that normal schedule stuff is kind of out the window. And it is best if you don't post until you're actually convinced we're going to be able to have a town meeting. So, right now, I can tell you we can't have a town meeting next week, so it wouldn't make sense to post the warrant today, right? You want to wait until you're really sure that you're a week away from being in a situation where having a town meeting is a realistic possibility, and don't post until then. So that's sort of the first thing. And then the sort of backup to that is that the state has empowered town moderators to declare a health emergency to delay town meetings even further. So if in consultation with our Board of Health, you guys, public safety, I determined that I don't believe that it's appropriate for us to have a town meeting, I can just delay it by fiat for 30 days. And then 30 days later, if I talk to all those same people and come to the same conclusion, I can do it again. And I can keep doing it over and over again until the state of emergency is over. If either of those things happen and we end up just not having town meeting, then the 1/12 budgeting just happens, right? You don't have a new budget, so you've got to keep spending at the rate that that we've been spending last year's budget divided by 12 each month. So that's kind of the legal framework as I understand it. I'm obviously not a public health expert, but I'll tell you that the idea of putting a bunch of people inside during a time when the government is still saying that of more than 50 people are not appropriate is something we shouldn't do. It's something we legally could do because of a division of powers thing. The governor can't tell you not to have a town meeting on a public health thing. It's kind of goofy. But if the guidance is still that 50 groups of 50 is too big a group, then it doesn't make sense for us to be putting that many people together in a town meeting situation. Some towns have looked at creative solutions, and I'm certainly open to that as long as they're not ridiculous. You're trying to meet outside during the day with a lot of separation and some strategy to deal with the fact that everybody needs to hear and everybody needs to be able to have a chance to talk. Maybe you could have a town meeting, but the towns that have tried that so far have done so by going to extremely brief warrants with 1 or 2 articles. So they could just sort of do the critical business, and then everything else they push back to a special town meeting in the fall. So that's kind of where things stand right now.
So, all right, you covered the outdoor and the potential difficulties with that, not to include the unknown weather factor when the day comes. One thing that you just raised that I wasn't quite aware of is whether the Board of Selectmen do believe it's worth reviewing the potential of a smaller warrant for the annual town meeting and taking a lot of these other things that may not be required to move forward with administrative business and push that into a fall special town meeting or similar. In other words, we may not necessarily approve capital items this time. We may not approve recommended or requested bylaws, revisions or new, but we stick to the standard, deal with the budget. Maybe we change the way we present the budget so it's not a different person every time, but one person says, here's the budget, do you want it or no? And you go to the next line item in the budget and do you hear it? So we don't have to have every department head come up and present their own budget at that time, because we are trying to reduce the exposure time of everybody in the same place at the same time, as well as you reduce the number of people coming up to a microphone. If they don't have to, don't have them come up to a microphone just to say something if the same person using the microphone can present it every time.
Yeah.
Reducing shared microphones in essence.
Yeah, the whole idea of shared microphones is very troubling to me. I don't know how we deal with that in any situation. But I will say that pretty much every town is doing what you just described. The ones who are talking about seriously about how to, what they're going to do if they're going to do their annual town meeting. The assumption has been what everybody's doing is they're saying zoning, bylaw changes, anything like that. I haven't heard people push back capital necessarily, but anything that isn't financially required for the fiscal year, let's push that back to a special town meeting that we can schedule when things are less critical. And when you can because anything we do is going to prevent people from participating. And so you do not want to be voting on zoning ordinances when people feel it's not safe for them to be a part of their government, right? You want to push that stuff back to a time when people feel that it's safe for themselves to participate. So anything at all that you can do. And if there's things on our budget that are just pro forma, and frankly, that entire omnibus budget article, right? That almost never gets any amendment. So you could certainly do the omnibus budget as one motion. Make sure everybody has it in advance. Trying to have discussions in advance. Encourage that. If there are issues that people want to raise, they can raise them to me in advance, right? If we can do a carve out and have a short discussion on something. But we could try to do the town meeting in 3 votes. If we do that, then it gets a little bit more practical to talk about creative solutions like doing something outdoors. But I'm really not comfortable with the idea of being indoors as long as we're still in a limited population rule from the state.
Okay. Greg, you have any questions or thoughts on that?
Well, I agree. I mean, as much as I want to have the town meeting on time, I agree that if we're in a limited solutions, we're not going to reach those limited solutions to have the meeting. It has implications, as I've said, with the school budget. I didn't go back and research what I was going to, but I believe the school budget is going to be able to take a 12th of the money they're asking for because of this COVID relief. I'm going to have to research it now because I didn't before because we were moving forward with the town meeting. We don't have to post yet. When we get closer to the posting date, we'd have to make the real decision. And we're just going to see what's going to happen with how Governor Baker sounds. I would be surprised if he lets this up on May 18th, and I would be surprised if he's let off by the end of June. So I would believe we're likely to still have some sort of restrictions through June. So I'd be prepared to do it. We ought to start thinking seriously about it. I don't like the omnibus budget one vote. I am anticipating a battle with the school from what they put a very high budget in. I'm hoping they come down, but there's no way that's going to go in, at their number on our budget. So I don't think that's going to go smoothly. That will be a whole budget fail if the people turn out in droves for the school to vote it down because we put a lower number in.
Well, we could do it as 2 votes, right? The one vote was simply, there's no reason that we need
we could, but
have a
we
motion
couldn't.
about the
To
25
that end,
emergency fund.
To that end, we could, but we need to further discussion if we get there. But we're not there yet, and I appreciate it coming to our attention. We weren't aware of these things, but I agree. If it's against the state guidelines, we're not going to go against the state guidelines.
So, quick question, Josh. Should we set a date before June 30th? Or are you saying that if we don't set a date, in other words, do we have to set a date for then it to get continued like you suggested? At some point, we have to set a date before the end of the fiscal year, and then you start doing your 30-day continuance type postponements?
I could tell you that, the 30-day thing that I do doesn't happen until your date is set. And I can tell you that you don't have to set your date. I don't know, and I asked Heather to see if she could find out whether there's a hard stop at the end of June for you guys to post your warrant. I don't know if there is or not.
Okay.
I believe we're supposed to have our budget done before the 30th of June. Otherwise, we go into that 1/12th. If only because of COVID. I think normally we have to have it done by June 30th.
Well, right, no, but because in this situation though, could you reach the end of June and just never have posted, and then in July you're looking?
I believe the answer is yes, but I don't know for sure that we can just not post. I believe.
So that's something we can ask Heather to follow up on just to confirm.
It's in the KP law stuff. I just didn't pay close attention to it. I'm sure it's in there.
Well, I read the KP law stuff and it wasn't clear to me. So I think you're probably going to need to talk to legal counsel about it and get an opinion, or talk to the AG's office or somebody like that. Maybe even Ellen might be helpful.
Probably Ellen too. Yeah, I know I read it in the something about the KP law, but it was a while ago. But Ellen would probably be our best source on that.
So if you could find an answer to that, that's great. But in general, just from a public policy standpoint, it is better that you guys are delaying town meeting than me delaying town meeting.
Oh, you don't want to do it?
I will do it. I absolutely will do it. But it makes more sense for you elected 3 guys to be making that decision.
So based on what you had mentioned, once a date is set, we can delay it as well as you, or just you? Because we do have a moderator, it has to be you.
Right. As soon as you post a warrant, you're out of the picture in terms of scheduling. That's when it's going to be. And what happens?
We can recommend to Josh.
What's that?
We can recommend to you. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. So the way that law came about was that it used to be that once the town meeting was posted, it had to happen on that date. and there was a hurricane. And one of the towns, actually, the moderator and the clerk actually had to go to the site to open and adjourn the meeting. And they said, this is ridiculous. In the case of an emergency, the moderator should simply be able to declare that the meeting is postponed. And what they did recently is extended that to include not only like weather emergencies, but this particular public safety emergency. And to clarify that you can do it more than once, because that wasn't clear before. So now it's all perfectly clear up to the day before, actually the day of, if I wanted to, but why would you do that, right? If you guys post and then, I look at the situation and I talk to our Board of Health and I talk to our police chief and we make a decision and I say, no, I don't think it's safe, then I can just say it's not safe, and there's a certain reporting mechanism that I have to do to, send a message to a letter to the AG and all that kind of stuff to let them know that it happened. And we let all the people know, however we normally let people know things, and it's pushed back for 30 days.
Okay.
So
So
we
when
have-
we know do we have to schedule something by June 30th? We'll know whether the Board of Selectmen will be the true delay, or if we're forced to schedule something and put the delay on the moderator because we have to schedule something.
That'll be fine. And I think it sounds like we're of the same mind, which is that if the governor is saying that groups of 50 should not be getting together, then that means we shouldn't be getting together.
Yep.
And, unless, as I said, unless we can find some way, we still, our quorum rules are what they are. So just the whole process of doing an outdoor meeting is extremely complicated. Just think about how, the clerk would have to make sure that everybody who's there is registered and going through that whole process. It could take hours of people, say, sitting in their cars and going around and making sure that everybody who's voting is supposed to be voting, right? It's not a pleasant idea, and it's been done in a couple of towns so far, but I don't love it. It would really be if we've gotten a situation where we said the 112th is really going to be a fiasco, and we've got to do something other than the 112th, then sure. But if we can live with the 112th, then and we need to wait, then that's what we should do.
Okay. Dylan, you got any questions or comments?
Yeah, have we seen any examples of other creative strategies, remote meetings, or a combination of strategies or anything like that? Has that been done to any sort of degree of success, more than what you said?
Yeah, so I could tell you, so remote meetings are illegal. So they're legal for things like this, for open meetings. So they tweaked the open meeting law to say you didn't have to have a physical quorum, you could do this and all that. That does not apply to town meetings. So there is no legal way to have an open town meeting, via Zoom or anything like that.
Need an ID check still.
Well, there's so many reasons, but yeah, it's just right there in the law. People are physically there. It's like written in. So, and there's been no exceptions to that done at the state level, and no one is asking the state to do it because of all the other things that make it so incredibly difficult to try and do votes and stuff like that, and still have it be secret ballots and so remote is totally out. What one town has done is held an outdoor town meeting on a very abbreviated warrant, and they made it work. Another town has been discussing the possibility of technically when you hold a town meeting, if you have more people than will fit in the main room, you're allowed to do an audiovisual connection to another room in the same building and have an assistant moderator in that room, and you sort of split it up. And so someone has suggested, well, you could split it up into 10 rooms and have 10 assistant moderators and a few people in each room. And so, you're all in one place and it meets all of those legal requirements. That's technically legal. I think
School has a PA system in lots of classrooms.
it's technically legal. It is extremely complicated because you still have the problem of everybody would be using the same bathrooms, everybody would be entering and exiting through the same doors. People would be uncooperative about following rules like keeping their masks on. Who's going to enforce those rules? Your public safety officer. We don't have that many cops. You can't put one in every room enforcing these rules. It gets super complicated. So I don't love that idea, but that's an idea that someone has tossed out there.
I can see it difficult also figuring out how to give somebody the floor. What
Oh,
room
yeah.
is this person raising their hand in, and who's first? And
Absolutely, yeah. The moderator's job would be very difficult, but that's what the assistant moderators are for. So they would, direct their questions to the assistant moderator. The assistant moderator would talk, probably phones or something. We could use a Zoom meeting in the building, right, to communicate assistance. It's awfully complicated, and I don't know that it's any better. I think the short answer to your question, Dylan, is there are no good ideas out there. There are just some ideas.
Well, the military has no problem putting 10,000 people in a parade ground and addressing them, so you could always go to a base and, no, it has to be in town, sorry.
It has to be in town. Yeah. And as I said,
Pretty impressive parade grounds in the military, let me tell you.
We really want to make sure that we remember that the whole point of town meeting is that it's a direct form of government, and people should feel safe to participate in their own government. That's why we are doing the vote by mail, because we want people to vote. We want them to feel safe voting. We don't want people to not vote because they don't feel safe. That's not right.
Well, we have some hurdles coming up. We'll see what the governor says on May 18th. We'll be having another meeting. I don't even, what is our date today? The 4th?
Yep.
So we'll have a meeting on the 18th, right after the governor's probably chat to say what he's doing, I would assume. So our next meeting will have more information. And I think our posting deadline, if we were going to go forward with the 16th, is going to be, is it 2 weeks before? The second would be our deadline?
7 days.
7.
That,
It's 7
7
days
days.
for the annual, 10,
also,
14.
so we could even hold our posting off to the first week of, first meeting in June to decide if we're going to post or not, or if we have to post. So we do have some time to think about it. But we definitely need to start thinking about it.
one question, since there's not a whole bunch of graduations and ceremonies going on at the high school, do you think the high school auditorium would be better than Ruggles Lane Gymnasium cafeteria for a gathering? Could we create greater space between people?
Not necessarily the auditorium, but maybe the cafeteria. So if you think about the auditorium at Quabbin, the entrance and egress is a bit of an issue. There's really only one set of doors. I think maintaining social distancing and getting people in and out of that room would be very difficult. I'm also concerned that it's an extremely enclosed space. So the whole 6-foot guideline is about people who are moving past each other in a grocery store, not people who are sitting in one place for 2 hours. So I'd be concerned about that. The cafeteria, I could imagine you could do 10-foot social distance, right? Big spaces and, yeah. So maybe using a space like that. Although, again, if you're going to go that route, why not just go outside?
Well, you've got to, by doing that, you still have a perimeter controls so that people are registered, not registered.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but
you
I
don't have to
imagine
worry
with
about
some help
weather.
from the police department, if we did it at Quabbin's parking lot, they could probably control entrance and egress to the parking lot, and therefore, you check in as you drive in. I think that's what the town that did it outdoors. That's what they did. Is that you would get there, you check in your car, and now you're in the parking lot. You're officially okay. You're a voter, right?
Okay, gotcha.
Those things are maybe doable, but again, if we can avoid it and we can live with the 1/12, and we have to live with the 1/12 all year, right? We just have to live with the 1/12 until things get normal again, and then we can go ahead and pass a budget and catch up.
All right. I have no further questions on this item. Does anybody else here have a question on this? Comments, thoughts?
If this comes up in a future one of your meetings, Heather knows how to reach me. It's not like I'm going to be anywhere. So you can call me and I can jump on the Zoom absolutely for any of your future meetings. It's really not a problem.
I appreciate it a lot, Josh. Thank you.
Okay.
Enjoy your evening, sir.
You too.
All right. So next item on the agenda, COVID-19 virus town update. Heather, what's your update?
Okay, so just a couple of things. So we've continued to meet on Wednesdays as emergency management team. We actually now have the school superintendent who checks in on Wednesdays as well, so we can make sure we know what's going on and share information. Let's see the newest update. So as everyone's probably aware, the governor did make the order now that everyone should be wearing masks in public if they're not able to keep social distancing. So we did put something out there on Facebook, and we'll probably have to get ready to do a reverse 911 reminder to folks. My concerns are that we need to make sure that we communicate this with all of the departments, especially those who still have forces coming in, such as PD, FD, DPW. I think it's going to be more relevant if folks ride in a vehicle together. Otherwise, I think they can probably stay more space in between them. One of the other things that has come up is looking at reconstitution plans. So once we are good and out of the all but essential services and we start to bring people back, we're starting to look at internal plans in the town building itself. For like Henry Woods building would be the first spot to see how to safely bring people back, when we would include public into the building, if we would have just one designated area. So we are all trying to tap all of our resources and listservs and information that's out there to continue with those conversations. The idea is to, once we do open it up and have people there, are there any offices that we have issues with, there's multiple people in, that we have to be cognizant and careful of? And also, do we need to have a specific location for all of the public to come in? And from there, we also, oh, lots of sounds in the background. From there, we also need to look at some of the other buildings as well. One of the issues we're going to run into is if we continue to keep up cleaning as we have been able to do with the limited use of some of the buildings. As we start to open the buildings, it means that Tony's not going to have enough time, not going to have enough Tony to be able to send around to all the different buildings to continue the same level of cleaning. So we're going to have to look at alternative options. I have had a previous conversation with the superintendent of schools because I know they're not currently utilizing their custodial staff at full level right now because they don't have all their buildings. If they do continue to keep those folks on staff and they don't furlough, don't lay off, then I will look to see if they will allow us to use at no cost to us additional custodial assistance to help Tony. And if we needed to, we could always pull someone else on to assist Tony with the cleaning and put it under the COVID-19 expenses. We do have some funding up front from DPH through the Board of Health that we actually already have some funds in place to cover additional cleaning costs. So we could utilize some of those initially as well. But those are some of the major concerns. We're still looking at planning. We'll dive into it a little bit more on Wednesday when we meet as emergency management team. And then we'll probably have to get a little bit more detailed over the next couple of days. And we're really looking for the guidance to come down from the state as to what their minimum requirements are to make sure that we're meeting everything and not missing anything in the moving forward. My guess would be that where we start seeing operations get back to the new normal sooner than later with the Henry Woods building, that the Council on Aging would probably be the last building to open, and that the library in between, we'd have to figure a lot more pieces because there's a lot more people, a lot more space and other things going on there. But that's where we are with those pieces. There's a bunch of big calls coming this week. One of them being a call with Sean Cronin, who's the Division of Local Services head for the state tomorrow through the Small Town Administrators Massachusetts meeting. That's what I alluded to earlier with Claire, Jean, and Sharon and myself all being able to Zoom into. So really hoping for some guidance from Sean. Talking to a lot of the municipalities, everyone's getting a little apprehensive and everyone's being very conservative with their projections for next year. But we'd really like some guidance from the state of whatever they can offer, in the hopes that we're all operating more cohesively and have things look the same as opposed to having 351 different versions, which I think right now is what we're going to get. So that's where we're looking with those pieces. We're trying to make sure that Board of Health has all of the resources they can. As folks may have noticed, the numbers did jump up a little bit this past week. In talking with our Board of Health folks, they said that we are now seeing a little bit more of community spread. They're hoping that we have currently hit the peak and we'll start to go down from there. But they want to be mindful and remind folks that precautions should still be taken. And even though the weather's out, COVID-19 still hasn't gone away. So we still shouldn't see large groups of people hanging out, and people should still be washing their hands and being cognizant of all those pieces. Are there any specific questions for me on COVID-19?
I didn't have a specific question. I got something just to add on to the thing, but nothing specific.
Okay.
Did you have something specific, Greg or Dylan, that you wanted to ask about this? Okay. The only thing I wanted to add is I have had someone come to me talking about family members that use Camp Colebrook April to October as their home, and wanted to know if people that left their winter home that actually cannot be there in the summer, they don't own the home or they don't have a contractual connect, they pretty much get it like October, November to April or May, and then they got to leave and go to their summertime. And so they're kind of stuck. They don't have a home if they can't move into Camp Colebrook. And I got an email from someone who said that their brother is in that situation and that he had to move out of his place on May 2nd. And the plan was to move in the April, May to October period. And they're a full-time kind of resident of Barre during the summer. Well, actually half the year. April to October is 6 months. So it's a 50-50 split depending on how soon they get here and how quick they leave in October. So I did mention it. I brought it to the Board of Health's attention. And I did look on the state's website, and they identify a group of residential/shelter facilities and services as essential. And one of the descriptions they indicated was workers responsible for the leasing of residential properties and RV facilities to provide individuals and families with ready access to available housing. So I have asked the Board of Health to review that and consider whether the longer term people that use Camp Colebrook fit into that category versus the weekenders or the once a week people. And to see if that's something that Camp Colebrook can provide a plan on how people could move in that are here for a 6 month term, not for 1 week or just over the weekend. Just putting it out there, it is something that was brought to the Board of Selectmen's attention. The licensing of the Camp Colebrook falls under the Board of Health, and a lot of these guidelines or executive orders from either the federal or state that flow down to us usually fall from the Department of Public Health, not necessarily, or are it doesn't necessarily put it under the Board of Selectmen's authority to make a decision on it. So I just wanted to put it out there. It was something that was brought up to me. It is something that we are considering because we do believe it's serious. You can't keep somebody from their home. So it's something I do believe they're considering, and we'll see where it goes. But I just wanted you to know it was brought to our attention, and we are trying to review it and make sure we make the appropriate decision for the community. I have nothing more to say on that. I just wanted to put that out there. Just that it was brought to our attention and we're not ignoring it.
I'd make a couple of comments. We did discuss this before. And is I think the Board of Health did the right thing to not allow them to open. There's the potential to bring in probably in excess of 1,000 people. Even if they go to the campground, they're still going to come to our grocery stores and our pharmacy and our restaurants. And we're going to have a 20% influx of people from all over the place coming into Barre, which really doesn't quarantine and keep our people in Barre safe. So the benefit of a few who haven't planned, both the president and the governor have made evictions not processable for 120 days until after this COVID emergency is done. So nobody can be forced out of any place they're at. If they left, that's their fault for not having a place to go, unfortunately. But they certainly didn't have to leave where they were. The federal and state governments have made sure that nobody gets forced out and has to go from anywhere. So nobody should have lost their housing from the winter. It's unfortunate that they have, but we certainly can't open the campground up for one or two. It's open and not open. And I don't think it's doing right by the citizens of this town to open up the potential of 1,000+ people to come into Barre and start utilizing our town from who knows where and who knows what their conditions are. I still think it's a good idea to keep it closed, and the state has allowed campgrounds to open as long as they have a plan in place that shows how they're going to keep these people safe, and it has to be approved by the town, so the town is satisfied that we're not be putting it at risk by them being open, and I don't think we have that from Colebrook yet.
I'm just curious why you think that increases the risk to the town versus every other person that can just drive by, stop in, go to the same store every week. We have people. I'm just curious, how does that increase the risk to the town? Just
Sure.
by being here, not necessarily.
Sure. I'm glad to answer. The people that do go into town, most people aren't traveling unless they're, necessary workers, part of the essential work staff. So those people that come and go are pretty normal. There's not a lot of visitors right now to the town. There's not a lot of people commuting to our town. So it's different in the fact that it would be 1,000 people they all come to our grocery store. They all come to our package stores, and they all go to our pizza shop. I used to go to the campground with a lot of people down there, and they live in town when they're there. So it brings our residency up by 1,000 people, and they will be here in town. They have the recreation down there. They're swimming, they're drinking, they're campfires, but they buy all their food and spend their daytimes up in town all the time, and they interact with the public in all of our facilities. So,
Well, the public areas at the campground wouldn't be open. You wouldn't be opening up a pool or
no, certainly not. But they're still going to need groceries. They're still going to go buy booze. They're still going to buy pizzas and subs and sandwiches, and they're still going to go to the gas station. So we're introducing 1,000 people that would not be here otherwise, that are going to go to all these places and interact with our population. And that's why it was a good idea in the first place to keep it closed, and that part of it hasn't changed, to me anyways.
Are we talking about two different things? I was under the impression we were discussing a handful of cases of people who use Colebrook as their summer residence, not 1,000 partiers. Just a handful of special cases. Is that not what we're talking about?
well,
How
that's
do you
what I thought.
differentiate them? How do you
The
differentiate?
numbers wrong.
Sorry, I heard both of you at the same time. I couldn't understand either.
Mm-hmm.
I'll speak first, and you, Greg. What I thought was just a long-term residence, and I didn't necessarily expect that to be 1,000 people, but maybe that's my fault for not better understanding the total number of people that can be at the campground and how many of them are April to October, or close to that, May to September. But to me, there's a fine line where if that's their home, you treat them like you do everybody else in town that has a home. And so stay home, good social distancing. We're not opening up the pools and the common areas at the campground for everybody to gather together around fires and play. It would be like South Barre along Main Street, Vernon, Nelson. It's a dense populated neighborhood, but it's still a home. And we're not opening up a whole bunch of places in town for people to still social gather. So to me, it's like if you're wearing a mask and you're washing your hands, first of all, the potential that someone else is going to make you sick is greatly reduced, whether they're wearing a mask or not. But still, if everybody's wearing masks based on the current standard, then I think, and I think, Greg, you've even mentioned these numbers before. 10% of those tested get it, and 1% of those might actually have to go to the hospital. But then you've got to compare to the people that you're saying you can't have a home. And to me, I don't feel right telling somebody you can't have your home because there's a potential that someone else might get sick because of that, because you gave them a home. I just have a hard time winning that argument if I had to face the person and say, you can't live here.
They don't live here, Matt. They're not on our census. We don't get chapter funds for them for the school for 70 and 90 funds. They don't live here. They're not residents of this town. That is not their home. They choose to call it their home for the summer because they come here, but they have a residence. They have a driver's license listed someplace. They're on a census someplace, and it's not here. And that's what this quarantine is all about. Personally,
Quarantine is all about flattening the curve so you don't inundate your hospital.
Right, then you don't bring 1,000 new people into town. Let them stay in their other towns.
Again, you keep saying 1,000, but how confident are you 1,000 people would be using that place for 6 months?
I think
not confident, then I would suggest we be careful with the numbers we throw out.
I'm confident that if that campground opens, everyone who owns a camper that likes to go there and rents a site will come. Very confident. They love it there. It's a fun place. It's a fun place to go. People have lost their cruises. People have lost vacations. People have lost all sorts of stuff because of this. And I don't think that bringing potentially 1,000 people into town is fair to our residents. I don't. Everyone else is sticking home. People have lost their vacations, their plane tickets, their cruises, their hotels. Some of them are not refunded at all. Everyone's losing from this. Everyone's suffering through this. And I don't think we don't owe a responsibility to the few people who rent there for the summer. They don't contribute to our town. The people who live here and pay the taxes and work in town are the ones that I'm worried about, not the people who come here for fun to Colebrook.
I just think we're simplifying the argument a little bit too much because I don't know what Florida or South Carolina or Alabama or wherever these people are coming from. I have no clue. I'm assuming it's somewhere south. You kind of, you go to south for the winter, north for the summer. But I have no assumption that Florida said you can't evict people. That wasn't a federal regulation. The federal government hasn't regulated anything. They've just made guidance and recommendations for governors to choose. You go to some of these other states, they don't have the same rules Massachusetts does. So how do you know someone hasn't been kicked out of their winter home?
I don't. Fair enough. I don't. I know in Massachusetts, most of the people camping aren't coming northern from way far away. They're just, there's a lot of campgrounds around here. Most of the people come in from, within the state or very close surrounding states. They tend to set a site up for the summer and they weekend here. Some just stay the whole summer, go to work from here, but most people are weekend here or come up for a week or two. you know, I don't know. If you don't know campgrounds, it's a typical campground. But what I do understand is the campground has had their opportunity to put a plan together and bring it to the Board of Health and bring it to the state, and they haven't. And
Actually, they were flat out told they couldn't open by the Board of Health, so they didn't see an option to bring a plan together.
well, I think the governor's last round of orders are that places like this, if they get a plan together, I think they're included in with the restaurants that need to come up with a plan for 6-foot spacing, golf courses and other things. I thought they were included in that group of things that could come up with a plan. But in any event, it is the Board of Health decision, as we've said, and I'm glad they get to hear our debate. Or if they're listening, who knows, or they will hear about our debate about it. But it is outside our authority anyways.
No, I got you. And I appreciate the debate and the discussion. So that was
both sides, you know. As you recall, I'll be fair, Matt, my concern when we were talking about it in the first place was that there were people that had the chalets there that I thought lived there year round. And it was made very clear that no, it's a seasonal campground. They have a seasonal license. It's the whole place. So I backed off that. And at that point, you know, I don't want to try to find gray areas. I want to stick to our guns that if we're doing the best thing for everyone in Barre, you know, and the campground, I would believe, should be able to put in for federal money as a business being damaged. They should be able to look for recovery money for this. Hopefully they refund that because the monies they set aside for small businesses went fast. And hopefully they'll do more for them because it was woefully underfunded or went to places it really shouldn't have, but that's a federal issue, not ours.
Yeah, but the individuals that are looking for a home aren't going to get reimbursed for loss of income. Not loss of who am I paying to live while I'm already paying someone else where I live.
Maybe we could suggest to the Board of Health that they may consider a case-by-case petition from campers that they may be allowed. And they have a discussion with the Morgan campground and see if Morgan's willing to open and allow some case-by-case. Because Morgan, it's not like they're just going to open some. They have a water supply, electric supply. They got a lot of things they got to do, and I don't know how easy it is them to compartmentalize and let some people in, or if they're turning all the water on and wetting all the lines, and what else they have to prepare for. So Morgan may need an all or nothing. I don't know, but it's things that the Board of Health can discuss. I'd certainly encourage them to discuss it with Morgan and maybe see if they're willing to do a case by case. And you might have a few people that do literally that because there are definitely people who spend the whole summer there. No doubt. They move it in, they don't leave till the fall. There are plenty of those, and I know that. Some probably have to, most probably don't. But anything we can discuss and give guidance the Board of Health might want to listen to, it's up to them. You know?
Okay. All right. You got anything else you want to add to that, Dylan, before?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who work seasonally and need to travel for work, family obligations. In this letter that Matt was sent from Debbie Morgan, these people that they're referring to, her brother and her fiance, you know, they seem like they're folks who are not just coming to Barre to party for the summer, but actually have a legitimate need for a place to stay, especially in this time of pandemic. It's not as easy to find a place to go when you don't have a stable roof over your head, when no one wants to host guests or anything like that. And I feel like these people should be given a fair hearing in front of the Board of Health and anyone else relevant to this decision. And I don't think that opening the campground whole cloth for 1,000 revelers makes a lot of sense, but I think keeping people out who need a roof over their head and a safe place to go, it doesn't seem right either. So I think it should be a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Should we make, well, I think we make a recommendation to the Board of Health that it's just offensive to them. We're not trying to step on their toes. But maybe Heather could convey that thought that we have, that we talked about it and thought maybe they could consider case by case and to open up a discussion with Morgan on that, what they could do to make it happen. for the humanitarian reason,
Yeah.
if for nothing else.
Yeah, that's all. And that's really all I was hoping for anyway, was just the Board of Health to kind of revisit it and look at it again and see if there's something that they think they can find the right balance between protecting the community and helping someone that appears to have a difficulty finding a home right now due to whatever circumstances.
I think it would speak volumes about our town if we did find a way to accommodate those people. I think the character and the quality of people in this town would rather see those few people be allowed in. And I hope that Phil and the Board of Health understand that, talk to people, ask them. I think you'd find that would be the consensus.
I agree with you. Well, if you got anything more to say, now's the time. No? Okay. Next thing on the list, licenses and permits. We have a request from Asa Johnson, owner of A&B Auto Marketing, requesting renewal of his 2020 motor vehicle class 2 license, and a waiver of the town bylaw requiring current compliance with all taxes, fees owed on the property. Have you guys had a chance to kind of become familiar with that situation? Did you get a chance to look at any of the information that came out later today?
Not really. For some reason, when I've been going to my tablet, and I just got everything from Friday forward I got today. I don't know why it's not updating. I always open my mail, pull down, and usually stuff comes up, but I just got the last 20 emails today. So I've glanced at it, but you'd have to fill me in with an overview. You would.
Just a moment. So on average, I don't even know if that's the right way to put it. I'll give you the exact numbers. So 2018, so this is a bill date of July 3rd, 2017 through a bill date of April 1st, 2018. Annual taxes billed, not to include any fees that may or may not have applied, was right around $4,100. Not exact, but close to it. In 2019, his billed again similarly was around $4,235 or something like that. I'm getting close, but not dead on. And then this last year, which puts him to a bill date of April 1st, 2020, total taxes was $4,300. Now that's just so it was like $4,100, $4,200, $4,300, his taxes each year. For 2018, by June 5th of 2018, which was 2 months after his last bill date, we received the final payment that made him paid in full. In 2019, it took longer. So we're getting into approximately October 15th, 2019, which now puts it 6 months past his last bill date of that period, but he got paid in full and showed no remaining balance at that time. Then in 2020, there was a little bit of money from the previous payment rolled over, and then a payment in April of this year for $2,000. But what it does is it leaves them approximately $2,000 remaining to be complete as of his bill date, April 1st this year. His due date is May 4th. So as of today, he had a prior bill not paid in full, 2 prior bills not paid in full. His January 1st of this year was not paid in full, and his April 1st was not paid in full. And that leaves him with, if I'm reading this right, just over 50% of his taxes due this year still remaining to be paid. What I had done is asked to see if there was any approach or discussion about getting a payment plan in place. I did not hear of one, but because despite getting paid up in full kind of between each fiscal year, not necessarily by the end of a fiscal year, but before rolling heavily in, he's been able to get his business stuff paid off consistently. I thought you had to be 12 months in arrear before you actually could use late payments for not getting licenses renewed. And I don't know if I'm reading this wrong, but I'm fairly certain he's not 12 months in arrears.
I can pull up the bylaws again. I did have this conversation with Sharon earlier, and I believe she pulled it up to learn that it said any licenses or payments or fees that are due to the town would be what triggers it, but I'll pull it up right now to take a look. I think more so the concern is the fact that this is a historical trend where there's payments that aren't usually on time for this individual. It's in the board's jurisdiction of how they wish to proceed. But let me see if I can find that by law for a few seconds if the board wanted to discuss in the meantime.
Yep.
Late
Under
payments,
the licenses and permits category of the town code.
the late payments of incurring fees and interest, and he's catching up year by year. It's not the way we want to get him. Self-employed, my bills get late sometimes. I'm juggling which one I pay sometimes. My money comes in nothing for a month and a half, then a bunch all at once. You know, I'm sympathetic to the cause, and the fact that they catch up every year. I always try to make sure mine are all paid within a year. I've been in the same boat. You know, the license is going to harm their ability to pay us. So I'd rather see them get the license. Especially if only half a year out.
I tend to agree with you on that, Greg.
There's penalties and interest tacked on, and they're getting paid too. So we're getting more money when they pay late. So.
I mean, that's kind of how I look at it, and knowing the fact that he's presented with even more challenges due to COVID right now, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not inclined to kind of just throw more on his back to try to carry. We deny his license, so now he even loses more potential for income to try to cover his expenses. To me, it's hard for me to do, knowing that his history, even though he might slip each year, he generally gets caught up before he runs into the next year.
And the banks wouldn't lend him money because of that, but we're not a bank. We don't have to meet those standards. As he's getting his money due in a year and he's paying his share, I'd like to see him keep going.
I would recommend that we approve his
Class 2 motor vehicle license.
for a waiver of the town bylaw issue regarding taxes and fees, and renew his motor vehicle class 2 license for the year 2020.
Second the motion.
Any further discussion? Call for a vote.
Sullivan, yes.
Clark, yes.
Matt Urban, yes. Next, we have a Massachusetts State Lottery Keno license. This is a request from Apple Green at 2 Summer Street. Used to be the old Honey Farms, I believe, to help anybody remember. I got a quick question, Heather, if you could follow up. This is, when it says Keno license, is this a local Keno license, or is this the entertainment license that has to go with a Keno?
So this is a state license. The only piece that the locals have any say in is just if they object. So it's a license that a individual store would apply or facility would apply to the state for. And I think it's just like the Keno numbers and stuff. You know how they have those screens, old fashioned, and so forth with those cards. It's just to allow them the opportunity to do that at their store or their location. The only purpose of putting this on the agenda is if the board has any objections to them getting a Keno license, we would have to respond to the state immediately because there's only a certain period of time, according to that letter, that we can object. But otherwise, it's one of those things, if we do nothing, it moves forward. If we object, then I think they take additional steps, from my understanding.
Okay. Quick question, gentlemen. Do you find Keno something that, and I guess it's a business decision, so I'm not necessarily gonna jump on it, but it just sounds odd you would put Keno in a convenience store where people would have to stare around and watch a TV monitor to find out if they won. It's not quite the same as like a bar or a place where you sit down at. There's no seating in the building. So if there's no seating, I just think it's odd to do Keno. I mean, do you see any potential issues with that type of congregation around a convenience store, or are you fine with it?
The restaurants too. You know, there's places people can go to play Keno, but up in the center of town, I don't know where else you could really play Keno, especially if you're not 21. I don't think you make a lot of money at it for the business owner, but that's, you know, I don't see any harm to it either. I have no objection.
What's your thoughts, Dylan?
Yeah, as pointless as Keno seems to me, I don't see any problem with letting this go forward. I have nothing to object to.
Okay. I guess the only thing, Heather, is we may want to advise the business owner that there are local licenses that have to be followed up to meet the same. There is a local entertainment license, I believe, that has to be provided. Dunkin' Donuts had to file one for their TV monitor in their space. So as long as the owners understand that there's an additional, I don't know what it is, $25 a year, some type of entertainment license expense, just do it. Just so they know it's coming, and if they want to continue to pursue it.
Okay, no problem.
Alrighty. Well, good luck to them. Maybe somebody wins big. We all can smile and cheer. All right, I guess the next item. Do we have any wage authorizations, Heather?
Negative.
Then we are now on to Henry Woods Building Projects updates. I'll do a quick update, and then I'll ask for feedback for anybody else that might have used it. But I did get out there over this last week, I think on Wednesday morning, and I did kind of clean up some of the swollen, rusted out areas in the frame. When I used the door, I could easily use the push bar and it just swung open. The one thing it still needs is a little adjustment on the door closer. It's not pulling itself quite shut properly with the latch speed. I just got to kind of tweak that a little, just give it those last. Anybody familiar with it, you just got to adjust the last kind of like 5 inches. It kind of pulls a little harder depending on the type of door closer. But I think right now that'll get us through, but that's that was just prep work. It still needs to kind of be patched and painted to clean it up. And this also is still just kind of buying us time. This is going to need a new metal steel frame reinstalled. I don't think you're going to be able to, you're not going to be able to really bondo and paint this and expect it to last a long time. But the repair I did, I think, makes it a usable door for now. You know, it's not getting stuck open or stuck closed. It'll kind of keep it going for now. But it will require us to get a quote and have someone come out and say what it's going to take to do a mortar embedded steel frame. That's built right into the mortar joint. I mean, cement into the brick and all that. So it's behind the frame is mortar.
Is the frame rotted, Matt, or just the door?
Just the frame, not the door.
Oh, just the frame.
The door's got just some surface.
Usually that's a big piano hinge in some of those, and they'll come off. But
it's the bottom of the latch side of the frame. You come up about 2-3 inches in a significant. There's an actual hole on the front face now.
Usually those are 3-piece frames set in, and they fasten the door after, where they put the 2 side jambs and the header in, and they're all bolted. I don't know if that one is. Like the head is across the tall and the side jambs. Pardon?
So I don't think this was the knockdown frame type. I think this is welded corners.
A welded corner, right?
So, but I think it can be replaced with what you're talking about. So if somebody comes in, they can cut this one out and then just pop one in.
Probably, because those ones are fine, but they're not cheap. They're like $5,000 a door. They're, purchase price. I mean, they're not cheap.
And it's an exterior door, so you want to make sure if it's coming with a factory finish or something, it's got the right exposure prep.
Unlikely it comes with a factory finish other than a proper prime. But that's easy enough to do. But
yeah,
it's gonna be. We got to prepare for a good, 5,000 to 8,000 hit for that to do that. I would think.
The other thing though is
more than I do.
The door doesn't have your traditional 3 hinges. It has a piano hinge running up the entire, and that's connected separately to the frame. So that just adds a slight little bit to the labor of replacing the frame. I don't know how much, but it adds some work.
But the plus side is actually the door is the most expensive part of that. So if we can save the door, if somebody can find, and we can look, if we can get the same frame, if we don't find a contractor that deals in steel doors to quote it, we can look for one. But certainly, I would think that would save us a lot of money if we could reuse the door, especially, the crash bars are expensive. They're like $500 for a crash bar.
It looks pretty good. I think the most the door needs is just a light sanding in a couple areas and then just a new paint job. And that'll extend its life pretty good.
Maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe we're looking at a $2,000 repair or $1,500 if it's just the frame.
Let's cross our fingers. But
yeah, we don't know until we get some prices, what people tell us.
So Heather, just if you don't mind following up with Tony or anybody else that might use that door and see if you get any feedback about if it's working better than what they recall.
Will do.
I appreciate it. I don't know if you have any more updates on any Henry Woods building project stuff.
Nope, we're just trying to monitor the heating system and constantly figure out if there's something we missed. So.
Gotcha. So the next thing on the agenda, proposed parade in honor of first responders. I believe the other selectmen were also copied in the recent email from Dennis. We got about 4 people in town that have been trying to coordinate kind of a parade by the citizens for our first responders. If you've noticed on the news every once in a while, you see kind of like the police or fire driving by a hospital and the hospital coming out kind of thanking them for, honoring them with the parade of emergency vehicles. But there's some in town. I know Cherie Benoit, Dennis, Nika Jenkins, am I missing a fourth name? I think I am, and shame on me.
Mary Whitelaw.
Thank you. All kind of came up with an idea where the town would actually provide a similar parade for our first responders, because they're often not part of the kind of the parade because they are the parade. So not only the first responders, but also some of our personnel in DPW, even some of our Henry Woods administrative employees that come in every day or as often as necessary to keep the office moving, taking care of business. The idea was for people to line up on the common, and people in town would meet elsewhere. There is a plan to make sure we maintain social distancing, but then they would kind of drive up and drive around the common, kind of just offer their support for all the workers that just keep working and trying to keep the town running in a very safe and effective manner. So that's the summary of it, and I don't know if either of the other Board of Selectmen have thoughts on this at this point. What's your thoughts, Greg?
None.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts, Dylan?
No, sounds like a great time.
All right. I do understand that they're going to try to present a little bit more of a layout of the plan to, like, police chief, like they normally do if there's a parade or something, and just to make sure that whatever they're recommending to do, everybody's aware, so we don't have issues lining people up. I believe right now they're looking at May 16th. At 11 o'clock would be kind of the parade. The parade is primarily focused to occur, and this is a vehicle parade. People are not walking the streets, and the people that would line up on the common would maintain social distancing and use whatever personal protective equipment necessary to make sure we're following any of the state guidelines or requirements as well as anything local. But the people that are being kind of honored would line up, spread out across some of the sidewalks, making sure we can keep our distance, etc. But then the people that want to honor them would be gathering down at the high school, and then they would line up in cars, and then the cars would kind of do a drive-by up at the North Common to kind of say, thank you very much. So technically, it somewhat involves town property and town things. So from my perspective, if public safety doesn't have a concern, I would recommend the Board of Selectmen kind of approve or tacitly approve that we're okay with this. We have no objections with use of town space or concerns with safety, as long as those departments that have a say in safety get their say and it's followed appropriately. If either of the other board members are agree with that, I would just be open to any type of motion in that regard.
I don't know what kind of participation you're going to get from first responders to stand out on the common for people to give them accolades. I think it's a very gracious and generous offer for people to do a parade. And, maybe they honor by doing police symbols or fire and ambulance symbols or something, but and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you guys want to go out there and have people cheer them on. And I don't want to see them be disappointed with the turnout if we don't have a lot of first responders in the common. Maybe they want to consider driving by the fire station and police station and the ambulance quarters, drive by and make the parade route that goes by those places. I don't know. Just thinking out loud. I think it's a very nice idea, and I think probably especially for some of the ambulance people that are doing most of these things in transporting the patients and going out. I live by the ambulance. I see it go out so many times a day. The recognition, I think, is important, and people will appreciate it. I worry we'll be hard pressed to get them to come out there and stand in the comment to say thank you to them. But doesn't mean they don't deserve the thanks, and they won't appreciate. Believe me, they'll appreciate the sentiment. Absolutely, will appreciate it. I just, I hope we can get them to participate, come out.
Gotcha. And just to also add to that, they have definitely extended this to pretty much of the town's employees that have been putting in a lot of effort and time during this. So this isn't just about police and fire. It definitely includes DPW. It includes the Henry Woods building personnel. It would include the library personnel that I'm sure, at least I know my familiarity with Worcester Library, the entire department's not moving crazy, but there's definitely a handful of people that are still doing everything they can to make sure there's programs available remotely. They're still working behind the scenes in a way that people just don't see it unless they're regularly involved with the library. But all of these people are the same people that were that Dennis raised in his email about people they wanted to honor is pretty much, the town employees that kind of just show up, do their job, but we're not necessarily saving lives. So, Heather, for example, town administrator, getting the job done, working, comes in when she has to. Sharon, Andrea, all of these people, the town does truly appreciate the work they're putting in. And that is kind of what the intent of this is to make sure all of us kind of have a chance to hear from the town and their appreciation for people coming to work every day.
And I think it's important that people realize when, people get to work from home, that's like, oh boy, I get to work. Matt, how's working from home going?
I can't wait to get back to work.
It's hard to get in the mindset. There's constant disturbances in the house, especially if you have children. It's a change in routine. The things that are accessible at work to make your job go easier aren't there. It's challenging. And let's face it, a lot of people that get laid off, they get extra money with the $600 a week from Trump beyond unemployment. So, they're not furloughed. They have their checks. They have their job. And probably not having to work as many hours. But it's very challenging and very difficult to work from home for anybody. And the fact that this town is still running smoothly is a testament to everybody involved in that. It really is. I know everybody will appreciate it. I just, I hate to see them make an effort if we can't get a good turnout out there for them.
I got you there too, but
maybe they'll drive by. You can drive by the town hall, and people who come in for the parade maybe be out front at where they work and drive by where they work instead of having them all kind of go to the common. Or just a thought. But it's a good idea, but I'll stop.
Gotcha. So I would just make a motion that we accept the proposed plan as presented in the email with the caveat that if there are any concerns by public safety, public health, that the group will incorporate those concerns and address them appropriately. Currently, this is scheduled May 16th at 11 in the morning. This is a Saturday. And people getting together would start to get together maybe around 10:30-ish so that they can all be lined up and do their drive-by parade by 11 o'clock. More details will go out by this group that's sponsoring it. I'm just trying to package it in the motion. So,
Second the motion to accept it.
any further discussion? All right, call for a vote.
Sullivan, yes.
Clark, yes.
Matt Urban, yes. Okay, so next item is kind of old business. We already did kind of the vacation buyback. So we'll move on to the next item, and that was about annual town meeting and the opportunity for citizens petitions. Just to give a quick little thing about that, I had noticed on Facebook, somebody was asking about citizens submitting warrants to be put on, articles to be put on the town warrant and to go before the town at annual town meeting, bylaw, whether it's revisions or brand new bylaws, etc. And they were concerned that they couldn't do it unless they got enough signatures. And obviously at this time, COVID, it's harder to get people to want to stop and sign something or to get signatures. The amount of signatures aren't nearly as high. Right. 10 for an annual town meeting. But for some, the concept of just asking someone to sign something in this time, they don't feel comfortable doing that. But what I did mention at the time on the Facebook page, and I definitely said I'm not representing the Board of Selectmen. I said I'm representing myself, but based on the members of the board, I think I can say this with some level of confidence, but I wouldn't necessarily I would not speak for either of you two. I said that if you get the signatures, it takes it out of the board's hands. You're on the warrant. That's what the signatures do. It means the board does not get to refute you. But if you don't, you can still submit it and the board can consider it and add it on. So I suggested if you can't get the signatures, just submit it. We'll review it. And this was prior to talking to Josh where he said, you kind of want to squash your warrant down to as few articles as possible due to the difficulty of having a town meeting. But the idea was we wouldn't refute things just because they didn't get signatures. And we'd probably consider putting things before the town for the town to vote on without the signatures, even if we didn't necessarily agree with the bylaw. Understanding the situation, we may not be quite as difficult to kind of review a proposed article from someone from town that didn't get all the signatures, trying to just kind of use the situation to kind of balance how we would normally review an article. So that started the process. And then an email came in where somebody submitted an article to Heather, asked about it and said they didn't get the signatures or something like that. And I followed up with Heather on a separate thing, just mentioning my kind of familiarity with the Facebook story that led to this particular warrant being submitted. So there's the backstory. Now, just to clarify the concept of the opportunity for citizens petition. Was there a specific question from either the board members or Heather? Or was it more just in general about that one particular email that came through either earlier today or last week?
I had just put it on there, Matt, because you had asked me before the weekend to put something on there because you were concerned about people having the ability to get signatures for the petitions.
Okay, thank you.
But the concern I guess I would have with, just putting something on that doesn't have signatures is anything that the select board puts on, we put the internal effort and the research and we use legal to go in, to draft, to review, to revise. When we have something coming from a citizen and is a citizen's petition, whatever language they have, there is verbatim what goes on the town warrant. We have zero authority to take that language and modify it. So the difference is that in the case of what was already submitted, they were saying, hey, we should do an article to amend the bylaw. But there isn't a bylaw already there, so it would be a creation of a new bylaw, but they didn't give the language of the new bylaw. So unless that's in a separate email that they didn't attach, if the select board were looking at pursuing something like this and saying, okay, well, we'll just put this on the agenda, then we're going to be the ones responsible for drafting the bylaw. So having conversations with Ellen, there are potentially ways to do it. to get signatures on a petition. One of the things she had said is, I think sometimes we're looking at mailing it. There's 10, you only need 10 signatures, so they could always mail them to the 10 people that were interested in signing them. There's some other things, but I mean, the other option is if it's going to be a modified warrant, we're going to have it a smaller piece. We will hold off to the fall, but I don't know if it's a good precedent that the board wants to look at setting right now of saying, okay, thanks for the article, we'll just put it on as is, because then we're going to be responsible for defending, researching, writing, and doing all the back end stuff. And if it's a great article and something that everyone's in favor of, maybe that's the right to do. But I think the article submitted is something that's likely going to inspire some discussion on town meeting floor. And it's also one of the ones that, even with my initial research, I'm having trouble finding any others out there that actually exist. It seems like it's more of the sentiment of reinforcing something that's already a state law. You could do a bylaw to restrict the state law, but what they're saying is they want to do a bylaw that captures the state law and says this is reaffirmed by the town of Barre. So it's a whole bunch of stuff. It's not something we need to discuss necessarily tonight. I just need direction from the select board on how you would proceed with these types of things that may come up where there's potential articles to go on the town warrant. I need to know how the board would like to proceed.
Well, from my perspective, if we receive a request to have an article put on the warrant, but it does not accompany any signatures, it can be modified as much as you want. Because nobody signed that exact language. You wouldn't modify it without the author or the original person saying, hey, I can work with you, or I understand, or, I wouldn't modify someone else's article without them being involved in the process. But if there's no signatures, we also don't have to involve everybody else that signed it. Because they're not on there based on the signatures and other people saying, I read this draft and agree with this draft. So without signatures, you're not locked in. If it comes with signatures, you're locked in. You cannot change the word until it hits floor, and then you can make motions to modify it on the floor.
I go a little further, Matt, and say that when something comes with signatures, as we've just talked about in the past, we have an obligation to place it on the warrant. We have no choice. And if it's not worded right, that's their problem. If it doesn't have signatures, it can't make the warrant unless we place it on the warrant. And if the board places it on the warrant, that's our baby. And we can do whatever we want to it because we're putting it on the warrant. Respectful, yes, you'd go with the person and modify with them, but we don't have to. If we place it, it's ours, period. So we can always take something without signatures. And if someone has a good idea, I'm glad to listen to the idea. And I'd certainly consider putting something reasonable on the warrant if someone couldn't get signatures, if we liked it. But, there's always fall meeting, and there's always next annual. And I'd be a little more apt to discuss it with somebody because of the COVID issues this year than others. But be very clear, we can always put something in the warrant. We can take anyone's idea and modify it and put it on as our own. Someone could have an article, we could like 90% of it, and we could put another article on ourselves that has the 90% we like. And have two articles. We can always do this, so it's really nothing new. But I don't mind extending to people that we would consider things without signatures, with maybe, in my opinion, to repeat what Matt said, maybe have a little more consideration for things than we normally would without the signatures because of the COVID.
And that was in general, that was the thought. Just, we're still open to listening.
I agree. Dylan?
10 signatures is pretty low. Knowing people who need to gather 1,000 signatures, 10 seems
Doesn't it?
Pretty cushy, yeah.
But some people are very concerned with this. As we've said before, the data that comes out, Matt kind of said earlier, the data has been showing people who study California and New York, 20% of the population is getting this.
Oh, yeah, no,
So that's a good chunk of people. A lot of people are asymptomatic. So the people that are at risk that could get these health issues, they are very legitimately scared. And they're not going to go get any signatures, and they shouldn't right now, you know. So I know 10 is low and 10 seems easy, but you know, it's still a timeline, a time frame to the warrants open and closed. And I wouldn't normally consider it, especially with 10, but given what's going on, we're doing so many other changes. I don't think it's a lot to ask that we consider it, you know.
All right, so that was the discussion. I agree with the concept of considering it, but I also agree based on kind of the earlier discussion with Josh. The consideration may be, that's great, let's look at it in the fall, or let's look at it next annual town meeting, because we just got too much going on that even if we put it before the town, are we actually putting it before the whole town?
And to be specific, right to hunt community, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is a right to hunt state. If you don't want someone to hunt your property, you need to post it. And that obligation is there for everybody already. And as we talked about when we went through this 2 years, Matt, of the bylaws for marijuana, I don't like redundant laws. I don't.
Yep.
As much as I like the right to hunt, because I do on occasion, I don't like the redundant law. We're already protected by the Commonwealth of this.
Maybe the discussion's more about we could support a right to hunt sign on the road, kind of like the right to farm, but not necessarily have to write it into a bylaw. Because I understood based on an email I think that they had mentioned, the idea was new people moving in might like to know that you're going to hear gunshots. It could be all week long, depending on the time of year. You're going to hear gunshots at some point in the day. And it could be target practice, it could be hunting, but these are all legal activities that are going on, and you've moved to a town that has this.
I think that's a good idea, Matt. Some sort of, you know, the citizens of Barre support the state and our right to hunt here in this town. Something like that. We could figure out a wording and get signs made. That's a good idea.
There's our thoughts. I have nothing new. I don't know if any of you want to add something to a selectmen's report for tonight's meeting. Start with you, Greg.
I did want to touch on, we've been having a discussion about meeting with the search committee. And I wasn't trying to get a meeting with the search committee. The email we all saw about what they were doing, their process, and the conversation I've had with Mr. Lipson. I want to make sure that we agreed on what that direction meant. My impression was that we asked them to gather the resumes, filter out the ones that didn't meet the qualifications as they were listed, and then interview the rest, I thought, and give us the best 5. But it seems that they've thrown out most of them to only interview 5. And I it's not what I expected, and I didn't know if that's what you guys expected. And I wanted us to have that chat before we even involve them, because if I have a misconception on it, there's no need to talk to them.
I got you. Okay.
This is certainly old business. We can have this. We're not discussing specifics on the charge, other than what we thought they were going to do with the process. That's all.
Dylan, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't exactly recall what process we decided upon. I guess I'm also almost a little confused about that. Like, or this is unexpected, like Greg was saying. I don't know if Matt or Heather, if either of you have more of an understanding that, or more of a clear picture of what arrangement we reached with the search committee, but.
To be honest, I'd have to reread the charge directly word for word, but my understanding during our discussions about developing the charge is I do think kind of what Greg was saying, review the applicants, vet out those that don't meet the qualifications. But for some reason, I remember it maybe different than the words that were, I just have a gut feeling. Like, I remember for some reason it was more of a kind of vet all the applicants, so maybe they made all the requirements listed in the job description, minimum education. But then you get into vague details about, work experience. How many years have you worked either as a town administrator or just in municipal work? And depending on how an applicant or a resume is written, you kind of rely now on the search committee to review that and say, well, do we consider that an appropriate qualification or an application, or do we consider that something that says, okay, that's not somebody worth interviewing? So for me, I thought it was more like go through the paperwork and then spend your time interviewing people you think are appropriate to interview. But I could see how what you're saying, Greg, that is not necessarily the same thing what I just said, what you were thinking. You could have been like, here's your checklist of qualifications that the job description requires. Anybody that has these now gets interviewed. And if we had 16 applicants and all 16 were qualified, I didn't necessarily expect them to have 16 interviews. So I did expect another kind of review of finalizing the group you thought were worth interviewing.
But you could start with a phone call or something to zap it right down to 5. We've done this several times. Rarely has anyone come in and been what I expected from seeing them on paper. Rarely.
I agree. I think the whole HR world is kind of difficult.
So to discard a bunch of potential applicants that met the criteria without getting some feel, a conversation on the phone or some kind of feel for them, I think is not, giving ourselves the best opportunity to find everyone that's possible. And, even a brief phone call, some phone interview, you might say, it's not about that. I'd like to talk to that person in person. We're looking for 3 to 5. To cut it down to 5 right off the bat, it seems hasty. It's, we asked for interviews. We have 16 candidates. This is a serious position. I'd like to be able to consider them. That's all. At least have a phone conversation with them, and maybe they still don't change. They talk to everyone and say, yep, we got the right 5. But I didn't like to hear that it was vetted down to 5 just from tossing out applications.
How would you, if you wanted them to go back and kind of re-review and maybe choose an additional group to look at or something, how would you suggest kind of identifying, like, just randomly say, at least look at 3 more? I mean, I'm just curious, like, how would you approach the conversation back to them saying, could you do these next steps to just make sure we get a good pool?
This is part of what you like about doing it yourself. You know exactly what you're doing. We don't have any clue what these other applicants are. They're getting tossed out. I haven't heard any names. I have absolutely no one who's applied for this. But I just find it hard to believe that we get 16 applicants and it's that easy to whittle down to 5. I don't care if they've got 12 years experience. That could be 12 years of bounce around because they're horrible at the job. You just don't. You could have one of the brightest people in the world just to finish up their degrees, their education. They're itching to go. Yeah. And on paper, when we picked up Andrew was the assistant administrator, younger guy, little timid, not the best guy on paper, but he was a damn good fit for this town. And, granted, the committee did bring it to us, but, we want to make sure that someone like that doesn't slip through the cracks because I don't know the criteria that they cut on, and I'm just concerned. We could ask them that Wednesday night and get more information, but I want to make sure that we're not overlooking potentials, and splitting hairs on paper, because you can write whatever you want on paper. someone could BS you and write the most wonderful, wonderful piece of paper you ever seen. This is the holy grail. We're so lucky. And they don't know it. Someone just wrote it for them. They don't know anything.
I was gonna say.
You know? They haven't graduated high school. They just said all this junk. See if it's silly enough to hire you. You know what I mean? Someone could BS us the whole way and be a 17-year-old kid that didn't even graduate high school. And we could be interviewing them because their resume looked good.
Yep.
That's an extreme exaggeration. But, you know, very possible. People embellish on their resumes often. Some outright lie. Hopefully we don't have that. But people tend to embellish. You want to look at the good things and accentuate them, you know. And just because someone else might not be doing that, somebody might be, nope, I'm not going to embellish. That's not quite how it was. It might be a stickler that's a good thing administrated, and we're overlooking it because they're not overselling themselves. And I'm just, you know, there's both people. There's showmen that are out there selling themselves like crazy, and they'll tell you anything to get there. And there's other people that are very smart and very good at what they do, but very internal and withdrawn, and they're not, you know, boasting about themselves. They don't like the spotlight, but damn, they're good. And that's the kind of person we're going to miss by cutting off a paper.
All right. So I think I kind of agree with you. We should continue with the Wednesday meeting and have this discussion where we can get some feedback from the committee to better explain, kind of like you said, like, what box did you draw to say, do they fit in this box and that makes them an acceptable interview? And kind of like you said, can we expand that box a little? Just, you know, based on what they tell us, we might say, well, did you look at these attributes or these qualities, or did you even find out such and such? Because I agree with you. Maybe an initial phone call to everybody would have just added one more piece to the process.
Yeah, even if you started with the initial applications and just made some calls on the references, maybe not interview them, but check the references out first. That's something. If they came back and said, we have 89 we're going to interview, I'd never question this. But when they went all the way down to 5, I said, what? That seems like a lot of paper tossing. That's all.
Okay. Good point. I'm glad you brought it up again tonight.
This is all I heard you wanted us to talk about it before we... Yeah. I just wanted this quick chat before we scheduled something, but I think the need to schedule is there.
Okay.
That's all. That's all I got. All right.
Well, thank you. Do you have anything, Dylan, you'd like to bring up this evening?
No.
All right, then. Heather, you got anything else to add to the meeting tonight?
Negative.
All right, so let's do the very last thing I keep saying I'm going to do. Any public comment? No more attendees. All the panelists are here. I don't see anybody raising their hand.
That's because it's almost midnight.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second that motion.
Yep.
Call for a vote.
Mark, yes.
Matt Urban, yes. That's 3
Everyone
yes.
have a good evening. Those of you that hung out late, thank you.
Yes, thank you much. Have a good night, all.
See you in a week. Well, a couple days, actually.
Yes.